And let's give our AV team a round of applause. They're doing good work. What do y'all think? So our next panel topic is Agile Acquisition for Continuous Transformation. To moderate this discussion, we have another one of my big brothers, Lieutenant General retired Larry Weiss, President and Chief Executive Officer, Weiss Consulting, LLC. Larry, the floor is yours.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's truly a thrill to welcome each and every one of you to this panel on Agile Acquisition in times of transformation. I think this is a capability that is so much needed for our armed forces, and it's very close to me. And the reason I say that, I can recall, if you can just kind of drift back to 1978, when I was a young cavalry scout, and my platoon leader walked up to me, and he said, "Sergeant White, I need you to go secure this bridge, and we will pass through tomorrow morning at 0600. So I joggled down the road with my two 113s, and we secured the bridge with dedication and a lot of passion. So forward rewind 35 years later, I'm standing on a mountaintop in Poland, and I asked myself, I said, if my platoon leader walked up to me and asked me to go secure that bridge, would I do anything differently? The answer was a resounding yes. And that is the purpose of why we're here today, to talk about agile acquisition. And how do we get the things in our soldiers' hands so they can take the fight to the enemy or whatever their mission may be? We have an exceptional group of experts today that they have lived this stuff for years. And so what I would like to ask each of them to do is to take 1 to 2 minutes to explain their roles in the agile acquisition transformation process. And then after that, we'll really dive into some engaging questions. And so I'm going to turn it over to Lieutenant General Collins and let him go from there.
Great. Thanks, Larry. And if we could turn the heat up on the lights a little bit, that would be good. And it's always more fun to be at a UNC basketball game with you than here on the panel. In 1978, I was probably playing with, not doing the breach, but I don't know, we'll go back there. But thanks for the introduction. Rob Collins, for those that may not know me, is the military deputy on the Secretariat side of the Army for long acronyms, but things related to acquisition, logistics, and technology. I would say probably 3 parts of my job, and I'm an advisor, providing military advice to our civilian leadership on all things from program execution as we go through those activities. I would also tell you, as I look out and I see some of my good friends from the contracting community related to second big hat, procurement, so spend a little bit of time on that. And then near and dear to my heart is also on the workforce, as one of my roles is the career manager for 7 functional areas that we've got that we go there. And so I'll leave it at that, but got lots of thoughts on how that as we take what is going on across the global environment, across what's going on technology, threat, and even across the landscape, we have a tremendous opportunity to kind of move and adjust and adapt and go more quickly. So thank you. Now to one of the experts.
All right, good afternoon. So I am Jennifer Swanson, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Data Engineering and Software. and I have the esteemed privilege of working very closely with General Collins on really everything that we do. So my job for the past almost 3 years in this position has been driving digital transformation for acquisition. So a lot of the things that we've done, enabling the adoption of modern software practices by changing processes, really Army processes, from requirements to testing to really all of the things that we need to do to be able to accept modern software practice development. So that's been a big thing, and similar types of things across other technologies like data, digital engineering, AI, et cetera. And so all of that really helps us to set the stage and the foundation for agile acquisition. So that's pretty much been my role over the past couple of years. Over to you.
Yes, ma'am. So Mike Kalustian, I am the Director for Transport and Network Cybersecurity for the Next Generation Command and Control program. I'm headquartered in Austin, Texas at Army Futures Command headquarters. My teammate, Colonel Matt Skaggs, who's not here right now, but he's the product owner for the data integration and application layer of the project. We came together about 18 months ago. General Rainey hired us both to start looking at next-gen command and control and to look at command and control differently than what we were doing, making sure that we really emphasized commander in C2 and that we were focused on, as Ms. Swanson just spoke about, the data. How do we ensure that we're getting the right data to our commanders in the field, understanding that the future fight is going to be extremely difficult, it's going to be extremely fast. How do we ensure that we're getting our commanders the right data so they can make the better decision, the faster decision, and more decisions than a peer adversary. So that's really what the crux of this is about. We developed a tech stack for next generation command and control. And like I mentioned, the foundational portion of that stack, or the foundational layer, is really the data integration piece, right? And if you look at, you're not seeing a picture of it, but we have an application layer, and then the data integration layer is where really all the magic is going to happen. And how do we integrate data from numerous government and commercial sources into something that's going to be coherent and usable by our force, and so that we can write applications off of it. And then we look at, all right, what's the compute infrastructure that we're going to need and the transport to ensure that we're going to be able to use this in a contested environment. So that's really what we've been led to do. We're transitioning and have been transitioning over to this to General Pat Ellis and the team over at C2 CFT, and starting to work the requirements. And this is starting to, as we talk about agile acquisition, moving hand in hand with our acquisition partners and ensuring that we are able to move forward from experiment to prototype very quickly.
Well, first, thanks to AUSA for hosting this panel, and thanks for the great partnership here with the colleagues on the panel. My name is Mitch Skiles. I lead our work at Palantir with the U.S. Army. And in that role, I've really had the privilege of bringing the capabilities and the software products that we've developed at Palantir into the Army ecosystem, where our core focus is really looking at how we can serve the data integration needs and bring AI capabilities that enable integrated warfighting. So Palantir, it's a commercial software company. We're unique in that we were originally venture-backed, focused on internal research and development, in building products and software capabilities that are focused on large enterprises to enable integrated activities that ultimately support enterprise decision-making. And so our longest standing partnership inside the federal government has been with the U.S. Army, which is really one of the most complex and sophisticated organizations that has really been forward-leaning on their investments in data integration and AI. And so really our emphasis and what my team has had really the privilege of working on is using those types of products that have matured in the commercial space, but have really been brought into their kind of own directly in the hands of warfighters, looking at ways that we can actually bridge everything from intelligence to operations to readiness force management, looking at this kind of full decision-making cycle that goes from the factory all the way down to the foxhole. So look forward to the panel. Thanks.
Great. Well, thanks. First of all, good afternoon. Let me just start by saying, Larry, that This is the young end of the table. I appreciate you putting me here. So, Mitch, I appreciate that. To those that are still serving in uniform, thanks for what you're doing every day. Those that serve in the Defense Department, thanks for what you're doing. Our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines need all the help we can give them with whatever we can bring to bear to help them come home. I'm one of the senior vice presidents in Andrel, a private equity venture capitalist-backed company, really focused on moving it at speed. I would articulate the best I could that, and this might be a little provocative, I'm not sure we need acquisition reform as much as we need behavior reform. And what I mean by that is, I think General Collins, as his role as a military deputy, I think we have lots of authorities from Congress. I think we tend not to use all those authorities that have been given to us. And I think if we want to adapt at the pace that we need to adapt, then we have to change that behavior. I don't think we need any laws changed. I spent my last 4 years on active duty in that role, and we didn't change any laws. And so I think it's a lot of this is behavior reform and accepting the fact that we can move forward at pace, make good choices, and get the needs to our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines on the battle space. If you think about it in real terms, if you believe the National Defense Strategy, China being our #1 pacing threat, if you believe that fight is in 27, what that really means in practical application is we have 22 months. 22 months to move from where we are to equipment in the hands of soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. We cannot do that on the legacy mindset. We cannot do that on a legacy outcome, and we cannot do that on a legacy thought process. And so we'll look forward to talking today, and thanks for having us.
Hey, thanks, team. I'd like to start off by saying, I had an old boss. His name was Dave Perkins. And he used to always tell me, he says, the world is unknown and it's unknowable. And, the more I thought about that, the more it made sense to me. And when we know that we're going to be dealing with uncertainty, and it's just the way life is, you have to put those processes and systems in place to combat that. And that's what this agile acquisition is all about. How do we get stuff into soldiers' hand to deal with all of the uncertainty that we're going to be faced with? So I would like to start the first question off by asking General Collins and as well as Mrs. Swanson, just to be able to provide us that foundation that we can launch off. And the question is, the Army is continuing to focus on modernization and transformation. This includes the ability to acquire solutions in a way that supports the Army's evolving needs. And we know that one size does not fit all. So my question to you, can you share some of those types of approaches that the Army is taking towards implementing the technology programs that you've heard the panel briefly talk about thus far?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I will probably dovetail on some things that General Thurgood also mentioned too as well. And I would, I'll probably start the conversation and end the conversation with thanking the collective team, because this is indeed a team sport where we must all work together to maintain momentum. And then, I just think, through all of those collective interactions, I think is where we make a tremendous amount of progress. First, one of the things that I would say is, and I know, approaches to adopting technology is we enter into the new, environment that we've got. Rest assured, I look at, four kind of couple things. One, lethality, war-winning capability that we must maintain, our focus in on, and you're either contributing to or enabling. To speed not only on the operational battle space, but also in then how we adaptively agile, and acquire things. I think 3, scale. I think we are in a unique service that, things in small quantities aren't always, but we got to think about the tyranny of scale of how we do things which sometimes present some challenges. And two, cost efficiency and bending that cost curve. And so those are some guiding principles that I think through as we start to get after that. And I do believe that as you start to look at some of the theories, that are out there, the technology, the acquisition, all the things that we have built are an element of deterrence, in and amongst themselves. A couple things to answer your, as we adapt. I think one, there's the realization that two, down at the end of the table, as I grew up, it wasn't always the case that commercial technology was outpacing, what we were doing. And so I think kind of going back to that mindset, acknowledging that, I think is probably one area that we need to look to. And, software is certainly an element of that, and software is a part of all of what we do, and we'll talk about that here too. I think to the extent that of the authorities, and some of the things as I talk to leaders, there's a couple key attributes of things that differentiate those, but creative thinking, because it doesn't necessarily have to be a singular approach. There are very hybrid approaches that we can go to be able to tackle things. And so you should not acquire hardware the same way you acquire software, and we have certain authorities, and that doesn't mean I pick one or the other. We've done great things with hybrid approaches too, so I think that's an area. I do think buying methods, and there'll certainly be a lot of talk on how we buy things. I think we've got alternatives of how we buy. We do have authorities for commercial. We've got commercial solution offerings. There's other OT approaches that we can go after. As I look through, and one of the things that I'm interested in is, where might there be some barriers? One of the things that I often look at is there is commercial, and then there is definitions of commerciality, and could there be a time to relook of that infamous quote of a type that we've studied there for a while. I do think open architectures is absolutely critical. I've met with some vendors this morning, various opinions, but open is where we're headed. We've got to be open, and an overabused analogy, Lego blocks. Would like to think I invented that, but didn't. I think it is not only the benefit of keeping pace with threat with technology, but I think from an industry perspective, it increases opportunity for competition, that you can be able to do those. So, and then on the commercial piece, embracing that methodology of maybe we adopt first, modify if necessary, and then develop when last resort. And you certainly, there are things that we have in our inventory that you can't necessarily go out to the commercial market and see immediately available, but that's not in all cases. So, I just think that there's, an opportunity to do that. And I think back to the point, I think for our Army of how we're adopting and being agile, we put $1 against the Army, and that's not readiness, 2030 plus. That's readiness for tomorrow, and I think that's our value proposition. So I think that's some approaches of how we're looking at adopting tech.
Yeah, so everything General Collins said. A couple of things to add. So I think we all know that the way we are going to infuse new capabilities quickly into anything that we buy is through software, right? And so software drives everything. And it's really the only way we're going to be able to keep up, because at the end of the day, we're never going to be sure what China or anybody is going to be bringing to the battlefield. And we've got to have the capability to rapidly infuse new capabilities that maintain overmatch. And that's going to happen through software. It's not going to happen through, fielding new hardware somehow magically overnight. And so a lot of the work that we've done over the past 3 years in the Army to change how we approach software is really, it's not because we're developing the software, it's to be able to adopt the technologies that you guys are developing and other industry partners are developing rapidly, and open architectures become a critical component of that. And so, to me, and I think MOSA is one of those very, it means different things. It's like architecture. Like, what does that actually mean? It means different things in different contexts to different people. But at the end of the day, I think in this context, I would say very generally, we need an open data architecture, which the Army has. We developed one, we adopted that. And we need open APIs, right? And then really at that point, we are very open to any products that industry has, provided that they comply with those open architectures that we put out there for industry to build into. And if you heard the Under's speech this morning about really being able to leverage commercial technology that mostly industry is paying R&D for, not the Army, I think that's how we get there, right? I think we have to be able to message out to industry, okay, these are the APIs, this is the data architecture, whatever the other components are that we need to include in there. And that's how we get that innovation to be able to really bring those products in and effectively plug and play. And so what we have today may not, probably won't be what we want 2 years from now, and certainly not 4 or 5 years from now. And so with the open architectures in place and the ability to reach out to industry and industry understanding what we are doing, I think that's how we really are able to achieve that vision that he laid out this morning.
Hey, any other comments from the panel members on this question?
If I could, Larry, I think what Ms. Swanson said is really important. And I think it's important for industry to kind of understand this. The days of programs of record for non-capital equipment are probably over. You know, you used to go have a BD team and they'd go up, figure out how to make a program record. You'd make that thing for the next 20 years because we buy things on a 20-year life cycle. That's probably not our future. The future, industry has to realize that for non-capital equipment, tanks, you know, helicopters, that kind of thing, everything else we should throw away every 2 or 3 years and iterate on it. That's not how the defense industrial base has built their legacy. And so I think we have to, if we're going to be innovative, we have to realize that stop buying things on a 20-year life cycle, 2 to 4 years max for non-capital equipment, iterate on it, and so you're going to have modular factories that can make one thing this year and something different 2 years from now. I think industry has to get on board the construct that the Army just needs to throw things away, which is super hard for the Army, by the way. We're hoarders of people and equipment. So I think that model industry has to adapt the baseline thinking process of how to move forward.
Thanks, Neil. You know, when you sit down and you think about just getting a piece of hardware in a soldier's hand, that is complex. But I will assure you it's much more complex when you're talking about information and data, and when you look at the way that we're going to fight in the future. So I found this very next question to be a tough but fascinating question, and I'm gonna pass this one to Colonel Tulsi, and I'm going to ask General Collins to comment on it, as well as industry, if you could give me your input. And the question goes like this: adapting an agile approach across programs also make it essential for the Army to be flexible in the initial requirements phase. How is the Army enabling this, and how is it working? And then my question to industry: are the requirements clear enough from the Army for you to deliver the right capability to the soldier? That's tough, especially when we start talking about data and information. Go ahead.
So I mentioned earlier that General Rainey, about 18 months ago, when he hired Colonel Skaggs and I, said, hey, we're going to look at this differently, right? We need to look at the network differently to ensure that we're once again getting the data to the point of need for our commanders. In 18 months, we took a concept and we made it a reality in PCC-5 because we had the agility and the ability to move forward with experimentation. And I can't stress enough the importance of experimentation. Everyone thinks that experimentation is not important. Until you get technology in the field, in the dirt, and into soldiers' hands, you're not going to get the feedback that you need to actually make informed decisions from an investment perspective. So that's exactly what we did. We used a period of 12 months to have 3 sprint cycles. We started off at PCC-4 with a proof of concept, where we just really showed, hey, data from multiple sources can be successfully integrated over tactical platforms, and this is what it would look like, right? And we had soldiers, once again, you know, soldiers from the division level on down to the platoon, giving us feedback on what they think was right and if we were on the right track. And we were confirmed at that point that, yes, we were absolutely on the right track, that this is doable, and if we were able to produce something like this at scale, that soldiers would really want to adopt it, and it would be something important for warfighting in the future. So that was encouraging, and we moved forward from there to an exercise called NetModX, which DEFCON C5ISR runs every year, and we use that to help further validate where we wanted to go as far as the security and the network side of the project. So we said, all right, well, listen, if we're going to use this in a contested environment, we know we're going to have to contest ourselves. We know realistically in the future we're going to fight against a very sophisticated enemy that's going to have the ability to contest us and take certain things away from us in the cyber domain. So we have to be prepared for that. And what I really want to know is, how's the software going to perform when you actually put that type of rigor on the network? Right? And so we did that. We took links out. We actually contested us in the spectrum with electronic warfare and electronic attack capabilities. And we got a better sense of what we were going to need in the future from a software standpoint and what we were going to need from a low latency transport standpoint. So then we took that information. So we coupled what we learned from PCC4 and NetModX, and we said, all right, now we're going to move and we're going to shift to PCC5, which General Rainey said, this will be our proof of principle event, meaning we're actually going to field this to a unit. They're going to use it in a maneuver scenario, multiple maneuver scenarios, and we're not going to give them any help at all, and they're going to provide us feedback. And that's what just occurred, right? So we were able to give this to a unit, install it on Abrams and Bradleys and JLTVs. They went out of the field out at NTC, and they in the dirt, and we learned a lot, right? We know we're not where we need to be yet, but we're certainly further along than we were at NetModX, and definitely further along than we were a year ago at PCC4. So that's the importance of continuous iteration and experimentation. And without an agile contracting approach, even for experimentation, we wouldn't be able to do that, right? And so it is very important that we had that opportunity. It's important also to start small, right? So a lot of times we just want to start big and just try to bring everything in all at one time, and you know the deal. 99% of the time, the weight of that just kind of crushes the initiative. And so we said, no, we need to start small. What are like the 6 kind of areas, data areas, warfighting functions that really we need to capitalize on to ensure that our commanders are going to be able to fight tonight? And so that's what we really focused our attention on. So starting small. Like I said, the importance of the warfighter feedback was huge. It's been every step of the way, but in particular, what we just learned at Project Convergence Capstone 5, we have pages and pages of notes that we haven't even sifted through yet from the warfighters saying, hey, you know what, this would be a lot, this is good. And we have much better situational awareness now than what we do with our legacy systems. And this is truly providing a capability to our commanders that they have a better, they were slicing through the OPFOR at NTC, slicing through them because frankly, they had better C2, they had better situational awareness, they had ability to see more than what the OPFOR was able to do, and that's success, right? But that's the importance. They had to go back to their legacy kit on the last phase, and the OPFOR had a significant advantage. So it was quite telling just to understand, how much a C2 capability like this can change, is going to really change warfighting. So I think that's all very important, and we have to be ready for all environments. Right? So we have to be ready to build a fight in any environment. So that's why in the dirt, experimentation is also important. We need to be able to operate in the desert. We need to operate in the jungle. We have to be able to operate in cold environments and hot environments. And you don't do that until you actually get there. So that iteration is important. Then I'll say, what General Rainey really wanted to do differently this time is he wanted to make sure that we were providing industry the opportunity to provide feedback. So we created a characteristics of need statement, and we did a couple iterations of that now, and you've probably seen it. If you haven't, it's all over sam.gov, and we produced that, and the Chief of Staff of the Army signed off on it, and it said it initially started with, here's nine characteristics. Here's the 9 things that we need industry help with to ensure that we're getting after this, and we listed those 9 out, right? And then we've increased it by a few, but we wanted to keep it small. The original document's at 2 pages. I think the new one, because of a graphic, is at 3. That's what we want to do, is provide industry something that industry could provide that level of feedback on, and that's what the characteristics of need is. And I think that's just a different way for us to start. It's not an acquisition document. It's not a requirements document in a traditional sense, but what it does is start the conversation between the government and industry so we can start having that experimentation together. And And really, what I'll finish up with, the con is really a problem statement. It's what we want. We don't want to produce more. We don't want to be overly prescriptive. So we say, here's the problem statement industry. Come help us. And here's the areas specifically that we're going to need that help. So that's all I have, sir.
Thank you. Rob, did you have anything?
No, I don't know what else to cover. That was good. No, I would just say that on the requirements phase, very, very critical, and I think I would, along those lines, we've kind of vacillated over the time, and now we're more in the describe versus the prescribe mode, very specific. And we must openly admit as a community, for those of us who have been there for a while, we vacillated, right? And sometimes industry, if I give it to you vague, what do you ask me for? More detail. I get more detail, and you're too prescriptive. But I think we're balancing it about right, and I do agree to enable many of those other things. I would absolutely underscore the value of not only experimentation, because it allows us to be able to learn things early, but also as we go down this continuous transformation, that transformation in contact. And it's not just requirements in the M. You got to think about those other elements that we have learned on the doctrinal employment, the organizational structure, the training, you name it. And so all of those have been things that I think that have allowed us to learn early. I would also say that the ability to get that feedback early directly to the folks that are coding, developing, bending metal, or others is very informative. And sometimes when you experiment, like in life, sometimes the things that you learn that maybe have not worked out so well for you are just as informative and helpful as the things that have worked out highly successful. I can certainly say that. And so the other thing on requirements too, I think there's now more than ever an opportunity in the trade process, because you may not need to nor be able to deliver everything up front, but you can have some informative trades to be able to deliver that over time and be able to iterate that, I think was mentioned, and all the other constructs that Ms. Swanson talked about, I think help us in what General Thurgood talked about. And one of the other things that I think we're also tackling too in this world of agility is then from our funding structures, starting small and looking how can we more smartly organize our resourcing. So as we want to do things early, and we call it, flexible funding or others, and just organizing our structure so that we can do things as the threat changes, as technology changes, within that early environment, all part of the requirements phase. So just a couple thoughts.
I really appreciate that, Rob. Mitch, Neil, any comments?
Yeah, I think there's a really important and subtle distinction between talking about requirements and this idea of needs. And so I would definitely second the point here that the more that the Army goes and prescribes complex, sophisticated requirements, it actually takes away industry's ability to propose novel approaches to actually meet the specific needs or objectives that the department has. And preserving that optionality is the thing that provides the ability for us to remain creative in approaching things in new ways that provide everything from cost benefits to the actual increased lethality on the actual capability delivery side. And so with that, I think there's actually a few other kind of practical considerations. At least we've observed some challenges, particularly with the traditional requirements development process. And that's often that the requirements development happens in a vacuum, where you kind of overanalyze what the problem is, look for a general solution, package together what that actually is, and then advance it forward. And historically, this actually happened without sufficient opportunity, not only for soldier feedback, which I think is by far the number one most important consideration in actually getting capability adapted and into the hands of soldiers who can actually use this. But the industry feedback has been, I think, a a new change that at least I've observed from the Army within the last about 18 to 24 months. And having industry actually have the opportunity to provide inputs into where activity is occurring on the kind of private R&D side, and we're also seeing similar challenges arise in forums that don't necessarily look Army on the surface is critically important. So I'll share one story on this about like probably 2.5, 3 years ago. We were bidding a program for the Army, and this was right around the same time the industry was coming out with its large language models and saying, hey, these are ready for prime time. We were seeing a lot of partners in our business on the commercial side actually move to automated business processes as a way to actually advance and maintain competitive in their own businesses. And the Army at the time had developed a very complex, sophisticated set of requirements on modernizing its own business systems and wanted to make that more efficient. And we actually advanced forward a proposal halfway through the bidding process to introduce this new technology that was coming to bear on the market, something that we'd been investing in privately for some time. And due to the way in which the evaluation occurs on the acquisition side, that new technology or new approach wasn't able to be evaluated for merit in the context of satisfying those requirements due to the overprescription of what the Army was looking for. And not to say that the Army wasn't open to agile ways of introducing capabilities, but just the process itself ended up taking up all the airspace away from actually going and trying new types of ideas. And I've seen significant progress since then, but that's the type of thing that with industry feedback and engagement early, you can get exposed to, but then also on the capability needs and looking for feedback prior to actual capability being competed and awarded can also allow for the ways in which capability is actually delivered can be adapted during the process of acquisition of delivery. The one thing that I would caution on here for the top of the panel is the kind of movement to agile contracting has been extraordinarily beneficial in this context. But I would also just note that agile itself is a process rather than an outcome. And so where that starts to actually break down is if we see an overinvestment, particularly in terms of the human culture, of wanting to look at sort of using the process or evaluating the process itself as the requirement for delivering capability. And so I think the right approach is to move towards agile acquisition. The wrong approach would be to actually go and impose a particular process that actually limits industry's ability to try out new ways of actually achieving the outcomes that the department's looking for.
Thanks, Mitch. Neil?
Maybe just a couple of thoughts. Maybe just some thoughts out there to get the juices flowing. So you asked the question, do we understand the requirement document? And I think the message I would take away from this panel is we do, and it doesn't have much flexibility. Here's the problem with that. If you're one of the great 06 PMs that are sitting here in the audience, they're trying to get through the process in the Pentagon, and they want to know how you're going to measure thresholds and objectives. So when we stood up the Army Futures Command, at the same time I was standing up the RCCTO, we made up a document, literally General Murray and I and his staff, called the abbreviated CDD. And so that was just characteristics. We want to try something, we want to move fast, we want to be agile, but you can't do that with threshold and objectives. You can only do that with characteristics. So if you believe that programs of record are not the future for non-capital equipment, then how do I get a requirement document, and then when do I actually need a CDD? So maybe the answer is we don't even do CDDs until milestone C. Literally up to that point, we just use ACDDs and give industry a huge amount of flexibility and to change as we go, as technology adapts. And then it feeds this idea that I'm overly enthusiastic about, which is soldier-centered design. Bringing the soldiers in at the virtual reality stage of design, not later in the program, literally right up front. I'll give you a quick example. When we were doing the offensive hypersonic weapons, we actually had our soldiers in a 3D virtual environment and we had them do maintenance on the generators on the hypersonic weapon trailer. And they had all their PPE on, and it turned out that they actually couldn't, the engineers had optimized their trailer so well that the soldier with all their PPE on could not get to the panel to do the day-to-day maintenance on a environmental control unit. And so we didn't really know what to do, so we called NASCAR, who are really good at changing things really fast, and they gave us a great solution, and we changed that before we ever bent the first piece of metal. Imagine having learned that at OT, and the cost that would cause it to change that in OT 3 or 4 years later. So this idea of soldier-centered design, I think, is really important. And then the last thought I'll just offer is, how many of our requirements are older than 2019? Which is when we change our national defense strategy. So, Rob, you said this earlier, and I thought it was a really great comment. We should, and General Rainey set it up in the little lunch thing we had prior to this. We should go back and look at every requirement document written prior to 2019, and does it have flexibility to do autonomy? Can it be software driven? And the most likely outcome is they probably don't. And so, and we don't need to rewrite the CDD, just throw an annex on there, right? Just throw something on there that allows us to be agile and flexible. And so just think about the ways that we can help the P06 PM get through the process, which, by the way, wants all of the program record data in non-program record status. That's the fight the PMs are having when they go to the building. We want to do fast prototyping, but they want all the metrics of a full program of record. That behavior is inconsistent with the outcome that we want. And so we need great leaders like Ms. Swanson and General Collins to help bring the process up to them so they can actually make a decision without all of the knowledge that we're used to in programs of record.
Okay. No, great comments, and I did want to hit a couple things. I think there were some excellent points made, and I may work in reverse order if I could. One, you're very kind in the date that you mentioned on the requirement on the books of how old it may be, and so we collectively are working in the AFC team, the GA team, the entire collective community is looking at those requirements that may no longer be need modified or endorsed to continue. And so that is one, an area, and I know was mentioned earlier by our under this morning too, if not, war winning, and one of the hardest things that we do is the big D word and, divesting. And so we need to make sure that we, take a look at that. So I do think that's a very valid point. I did also want to mention too, I fully, wholeheartedly agree, although we look at processes of how we can address, never lose sight of outcomes. And, outcomes and some things that will resonate, there are many others, but, is it effective? Is it suitable? Is it survivable? I think we always need to be looking at the outcomes of not just have we addressed and then those are measurable. Sometimes you get metrics on software, and this leader here has done a great job of, it's not about fixing things, it's about have we made it better, and is it more usable for the user? And then too, on the value piece, there are tools, and we're continuing to look at tools where there may be requirements, and as you go in and evaluate, you can monetize and look at things that may be additional benefits. And there are processes where we can do that. And then I think too, setting incentives, because we want the collective team win-win, war-winning capability, providing war-winning capability, and incentivize to do all those good behaviors, and then place those incentives at a point of delivery that it matters to drive the good behavior. So I think all good points. I just want to reinforce that. Thank you.
Those are some really, really good comments. And I would like to add one comment, and it's not because I'm sitting right here besides General Collins, but I was chatting with Command Sergeant Major Randy. And we was talking, and now we're talking to Assault Sergeant Major, and he's an infantryman straight out of coming from a division. Now, frankly speaking, I struggle with requirements, just getting them right as I came through the ranks. But to get the requirement right, you got to have the right person to look at it. And when you start talking about the division sergeant majors and these battalion sergeant majors and et cetera, there's an opportunity to get it right. And so, again, my hat's off to you for leaning forward on that. Okay, we're going to move to the next question.
Could I make a quick comment? So we have disguised him as Randy because I want to protect the innocent, but we only pick people with the first name of Rob sometimes. But it's Rob Haney, and one of the greatest battle buddies that's been contributed, Sergeant Major, and talk about bringing value and getting grounded of what's going on with the war fight. And there are environments we get a lot of feedback in through a lot of communities, and Sergeant Major Haney sitting right there has been exponential in being able to do that. But yes, Randy, we keep him disguised.
Randy,
Handy. Toothpaste is out of the tube now, Larry. Sorry. So.
Okay. Since we're talking about requirements, I'm gonna throw this question at Mrs. Swanson. And so when we talk about the requirements, it's obviously we got to have an effective design. So the Army has implemented digital engineering across its programs, as mentioned by Lieutenant General Collins. So, Mrs. Swanson, can you share a little bit more about what the Army is doing in that space?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually just hosted a Warriors Corner event a couple hours ago in the exhibit hall with our PM for Flora, Colonel Jeff Paquette, and Bell, who is the Flora industry partner. Because I think Flora is it's one of our best examples of how digital engineering can really make a humongous difference in terms of being able to, number one, make sure that the requirements are met in the design without bending metal, right? Without actually spending money on a hardware prototype. Being able to quickly and effectively determine the impact of changes to the design. If a requirement changes, or if there's an issue with the material and I want to understand the impact of using a different material, you can model that in a digital environment, and again, it's much more cost effective and it's much faster, and frankly it's more accurate because you're able to really see the whole thing come together very quickly and understand if it's going to work or not. And so, General Thurgood talked earlier about the hypersonics missile experience from a user-centered design perspective and being able to find a problem years before you actually go to test. Very similar with digital engineering. And we all know in acquisition, one of the horrors is showing up at a test, and that's when you find out that something isn't working, and that's the old way of doing business. But the new way of doing business with all this technology, including digital engineering, is you get to figure that out before you go to test. And so the test really becomes, I would say, I don't want to call it a formality, because we obviously eventually have to build something and make, especially when you're talking about an aircraft, make sure that it works as intended. But you shook out all of the problems ahead of time, and you did that without any investment in building hardware prototypes. And I think that's hugely impactful and allows us to really move much faster. One of the things that we are doing right now, and we're going to do some real-time public staffing here, you and me, because you're not trying this yet, but we'll be bringing it to you soon.
Sounds good already.
Is we're looking at, so, when we do program of record acquisition, we often follow the model of building multiple prototypes, right? And then we down select. So we'll down select from something like white papers or something that is not a hardware prototype to companies that we say, okay, these guys really get it. Let's build 3 hardware prototypes and let's figure out how that works. And then let's down select to, whoever's going to win, or 2 or whatever. I think we could do that digitally. And I think it would save a lot of money and a lot of time. And so obviously when you pick the winner, yes, you have to build something. But I think there might be a way where we don't have to spend money on building those prototypes, because whatever we don't pick, we're throwing out, right? And so that's investment that we made that is not actually generating an ROI. And I think that digital engineering is advanced enough at this point that it could potentially help us to do that. Maybe not in all cases, but right now we're going through, building a framework and what would that look like. And it's something that I would love actually to get industry feedback on, in terms of, do you guys think that's crazy, or is that, something that makes sense? Because I think it would really allow us to just spend money on the things that we're actually going to build and field. Instead of, just things that we know 2 or 3 of them we're not actually going to ever buy. So I don't know if you have thoughts, or I don't mean to put you on the spot, because I know I just threw that out. So if you don't have thoughts, that's completely fine. But you guys can also follow up with me after to, give me your thoughts if you have any.
No, I mean, I think in general, that type of more continuous learning approach, prior to the kind of traditional 5 to 10 year custom development cycle, where you then have the, whether it's operational tests or user acceptance tests at the end of that period, makes a lot of sense. It both identifies problems early. It allows us to compress the learning cycle considerably and adapt to changes quickly, and then also switch between vendors and encourage competition. I would actually go maybe one step further to suggest that a lot of companies are also doing that type of digital testing organically. Yeah. And so the extent to which the Army can actually go and look at what are the tests and capabilities and lessons learned that exist organically inside of the partners that you'd be evaluating might be a way to even further extend the efficiency savings or learning cycle than just looking at the Army building organic capabilities in its own right to then go and project out into industry.
Yeah.
We've had this conversation before, but I think the kind of interesting point to evaluate there is just the difference between what is the capacity of the larger companies that have made those organic investments without compromising the opportunity for the Army to subsidize those types of tools to smaller businesses that actually allow them to accelerate into the market. And I think that's maybe would be an interesting follow-up.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I mean, the concept would be not us building them, but really the industry partners that are selected for, say, the 3 or the 4 or whatever models, and if they already exist, even better, right? Because if it's already a product that you've productized and you have that model developed, then that's less investment for you and faster for us.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I think we can be much better at using a digital environment to make decisions, and I think we should do that. I would also say that in that process, we should move away from kind of large spans of time to make a decision and use gates, right, with the industry partners. Yeah. And gate 1 is this, and that has to be agreed to before the contract's signed, right? And it should be as binary as possible, yes or no. And so if you have a gated process, what industry wants to do is be successful. They also want to know if they're not going to be successful, they want to reduce their investment, right? So having a gated process, not a milestone with these big gaps of time. If you start in the digital environment, then use gates and criteria that are set. I think Mitch hit on something that has to be accounted for in that process. A lot of small, innovative companies aren't going to have huge modeling and simulation capabilities. So there has to be a balance of that in the process. But I think anytime we can make decisions in a digital environment before we bend metal is a positive outcome.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that feedback. And yeah, we have to think through how we enable those smaller companies to compete without putting them at a disadvantage because they don't have all those tools. I think that's a very valid point. Okay, thank you.
I think General Collins had a comment.
You do?
Yeah, so I would say what we were kind of just acknowledging, just like yesterday, we would do the doors allocation of how long that would take, right, to do all the engineering process and the speed at which we can now do that. One I think is absolutely tremendous. And when you harness the ability to look at does it work in the supply chain, I think there's a number of other things that you can start to look at too, where there are bottlenecks or what if drills or whatnot. I would also say big fan of Missouri state motto, show me versus paper deep. I do think, concept, not, kind of what you're alluding to, and I really like the idea already on stage here, bringing in a small bid sample. And maybe there's a way to tailor that because not all, can do, as to General Thurgood's point, but seeing something and just kind of having that gate to be able to make that decision, even with a couple criteria, is much deeper than just paper deep. And I think we've got those abilities, have seen that, done that, and I think that's very helpful. And then I would also like to say too, as we make those decisions, and we may potentially off-ramp for those conditions, I would encourage that that's not the forever ever decision. We work opportunities, and where folks can continue to keep up, there are opportunities to on-ramp too as well. So I think that's kind of the new era as I start to look at, things that may be an option to be able to do just so we can continue to keep those things alive. So I just want to make those couple comments, so thank you.
If I could add to that, I think we also, in the discussion earlier, were talking about the as-a-service model. And so I think about a lot of the comments you were making was, just to get to that initial decision of the Army's deciding to go and make an investment in a capability, there's the whole other long tail of actually, for using maybe a word that's going out of favor, but sustaining that capability in the context of operational viability. And this as-a-service business model that I think a lot of industry is moving towards actually is a really healthy balance of a continuous process of ensuring that the incentives are set up in such a way that there is a clear, easy ability to off-ramp. So there's not 5-10 year long commitments, but the moment the capability is no longer needed or in use, you can go and turn it off. That makes someone like me and my team be on our toes constantly to go and try to outcompete, and we love real competition. So outcompete our peers. Everyone's ends up bringing better capability. And then there's a mechanism in which this funding is sustained in a way that's actually aligned and commensurate with the operational outcomes and viability. So, I would just supportive both of kind of what you're suggesting for the acquisition process, but would offer that we continue that way of thinking the whole way through the life cycle of a program.
And I would tell you is we mentioned buying models, and that's a great point. And just I think for all, the as a service, and we've seen things where it's worked well. You mentioned, and we'll go look into this business system that you talk about. But the software piece, that was light joke, but software, satellite. I think there's some clear use cases, and maybe some things that we need to take a better look at as we look at those, because I think that is certainly something that where we've got a lot of opportunity to kind of look at that business model. So thank you.
Totally agree.
Yep.
Well, I appreciate General Collins helping with the transition, because I want to direct this next question to Mission General Thurgood down there. And
you're welcome, Neil.
The question is, how do you ensure technologies are in line with the soldiers' operational needs, especially when realizing on feedback during the development cycle? Can you?
Yeah. So I think something's. There's a really interesting moment that we're in right now, where I think if you go back to kind of the Cold War era, the government was really invested in kind of, we might think of as foundational or basic research in critical technologies. And we've come to a moment now where a lot of the critical technologies that are relevant in the kind of national security problem broadly are actually being highly, highly subsidized by the capital markets. The most kind of obvious and trite example of this, of course, is the AI capabilities. And so your question actually raises a really interesting point. If the federal government and in this case the Army in particular doesn't need to, or quite frankly is incapable of making the appropriate investments in those basic capabilities, basic technologies, not only I think is the question, how can we ensure that those capabilities are meeting the needs of the soldiers, but actually that the investments are focused in terms of adapting those kind of basic critical technologies in the context of it being relevant to the fight itself. I would say the primary lesson that we've learned, and really the way in which we've organized our entire business, is realizing that that kind of last mile adaptation of technologies into making an operational difference is unfortunately, perhaps, certainly for folks like myself who want to be analytically minded, is an inductive process. So we have to be prepared to fail quickly, and fail in the context of where that operation is occurring itself. So I would just second Neil's comments that soldier-centric design is paramount in that, but then it also means we need to be precise and focused in terms of where we're actually going and doing that technology injection, and doing that in a context where you have sufficient leadership, and leadership that is incentivized or at least encouraged and willing to fail, learn, adapt, and continue on. And I think that's the only way to actually achieve the change that we're looking for. If we sit back and try to deductively analyze what we think the soldier needs based on, protracted assessment, we probably won't get to the right answer, and we certainly won't get to an answer soon enough that actually gives us the maneuver space to go and actually make changes to that kind of last mile adaptation of capability.
Okay. Neil?
Now, I think it's a great question, Larry. I would just offer, as we think about requirements and the changing of requirements, I think we need a fundamental shift in our mindset. And I'll try to link a couple of things as to why I believe that's true. Technology is changing at a faster rate than we've ever seen. We're in the time in history when the cost of the defense is more than the cost of the offense. If you believe technology is going to change rapidly, then we're not going to have big programs of record for non-capital equipment. So if you combine those two or three fundamental premises, then you're going to get to a point very quickly that says we need to iterate with a group of users and material professionals in industry in a single cell quickly. Rob, you said it earlier. Every program must have a set of, even if it's a 2-year program, a set of on-ramps and off-ramps. And generally, we don't think that way when we write a requirement document, when we write our acquisition strategy. I'll give you an example. I just recently went through this, but I use a historical example so it's not quite so emotional for some. When we did the directed energy programs for the Army, we had a very detailed gate process. 7 gates. It was a go, no-go to all the gates. And one of the industry partners came to me and said, and oh, by the way, when we were doing that, we cost shared. I think a common characteristic of the future with industry that's going to move at pace is cost share everything. So we had the 7 gates that we went through, and we picked 2 teams in the down select process, and one of the partners that was not selected came to me and said, we will pay our own way to get to gate 7, which was the final decision point. If that's true, can we come back into the competition? And I said, absolutely. Think about the power of that on-ramp or off-ramp. So not only is the government going to get cost share out of the 2 partners that were selected, but the pressure of competition, which industry loves, by the way, will continue at the cost of a venture capitalist company, in this particular case, so that when we got to gate 7, we actually had more choices. We should learn a lesson, in my opinion, from that outcome. These on-ramps and off-ramps, Rob, that you're talking about, have to be at every decision point. It can't be occasionally. It has to be at every decision point. And if you want to bring the private equity non-traditionals into the fight faster and keep them in the fight, then give them the opportunity. And if they believe in the thing that they're executing, they'll fund that to that decision point. And the government has more competition and better likelihood of outcome. And I think industry is willing to take that risk. My sense of industry is they're willing to take that risk if they believe that there actually is a viable choice to be made. Now, the moment in time that there's the hint that it's not a viable choice, then industry will hit the cargo release button and off they go. So I think having the ability to on-ramp and off-ramp at the speed of technology is really, really important in this conversation.
Thanks, Neil. I think that the audience will find this next question very, very interesting. The Army seems to be on the forefront of adopting and adapting to emerging technologies like AI/ML. And we know that both speed, efficiency are critical when it comes to not just keeping up with, but also surpassing our adversaries as technology evolves. It kind of goes back into what General Thurgood was talking about. What are some of the ways we've been able to accelerate our progress in these areas when it comes to agile acquisition? And so I want to direct this question, starting with General Collins.
Oh, all right, great, yeah. Well, no, I mean, I know we've talked a lot about, both lethality and speed, and as you think about the things, we are certainly, each and every day, every one of us is being asked to do more. And sometimes as we look, we may not always have more to do more. We need to think about how we can do more, both efficiently and effectively. And I think, artificial intelligence offers that opportunity to be able to do that faster, quicker. In fact, we even spent a lot of time, looking at things, how AI can help, me as a leader be able to see and visualize, describe, act as it used to go, to be able to do that. I know we've talked about a number of activities from the software aspect, the ability to iterate here too. Probably one of the things that we didn't talk about, as we go through and we test too, because we do want to make sure that as we get into this environment, there's policy, there's other implications we need to test. I was been part of intelligence programs, and you just got the authenticity, the outcomes right on how we do that. But I think we're able to do so in a very iterative process. One, and I think we can move fast too. I talked about the D word. There's also the R word, reciprocity, right? And so if something has been used in a particular case, and we're going to use it in a similar particular case, then maybe we ought to allow, with this limited set of checks and balances, to do some reciprocity. That's probably thing one. I would just say thing two, as we look at this, I think spending more time on trying to identify the problem that you're trying to solve, as we've as you taught me, and then once we got to that, and a use case, then I think those are two particular areas. And we've certainly talked about, as we look to the design and AI, as we would look about layered protection, a lot of opportunities in that use case. As we talk about next gen command and control, I think those are some use cases that I think that have the opportunity. But I do think those are some areas that would help accelerate the adoption and the ability to move on beyond what we've already talked about.
Ms. Lawrence, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I do. So I'm going to separate my comments into generative AI, because that's really part of what you talked about. You talked about both, but part of what you talked about, which is how do we become more efficient, which helps us to be more agile in acquisition as well. And then discriminative AI, which is really, for Intel, for Next Gen C2, for all of our programs, what are the things that we need to do to leverage AI so that we can have, we can better warfight. So for Gen AI, I teamed with Leo Garciga, who's our CIO, a few months ago, to evaluate some commercial tools that are on the market that are approved for use for us, right? Because we have, at a minimum, CUI requirements, and then in some cases, SIPR, et cetera. And so there are companies out there that have developed tools and have gone through the FedRAMP process and have done the things that they need to do. And so I'm happy to report we now have one. And I think I saw your email this weekend that you got your account set up on our new Gen AI tool. So we've been using it for a little while, trying to play with it. And I will say it is, I realize that for everybody, we all use ChatGPT or Claude or whatever at home, but we can't use that at work. And so to now have it at work is a big deal. It is very helpful, and it's really pretty time-saving for all of us, which is very exciting. From a program perspective, we have a team, I have a team that has been really focused on AI for about the last year. And the focus is really, what are the things that we need to be doing to take third-party industry models, train them on Army data, and validate them to make sure that they're doing the things that we need them to do trained on Army data, right? And there's I'm not going to go into all the details. There's a lot to that. I mean, it's not necessarily trivial, but we don't want to be in the business necessarily of developing our own models. There's a lot of commercial models that we can leverage, but obviously they have to be trained correctly to do the things that we need them to do. And so that's been a big focus. And one of the things that we have found that is, quite frankly, still a gap, and it's a gap across the whole AI industry. We've talked to, I think, both of you guys and others in terms of how are we, what are the things that industry is doing to try to get after it, is making sure that they are secure enough, right? And I think the amount of security you need depends on where it is and your use case. If it's a business system, maybe less, depending on what that's doing. If it's at the tip of the spear, it's on a tank processing data that we're going to use to maybe target something, probably more important that we know for sure that our data is not poison, that there's not Trojans in there, that China has somehow, has the ability to take that algorithm and turn it back on us. There's a lot of concerns that we're working through. But that's really been our focus because, again, what we're trying to do is really lay the foundation for how do we implement AI properly across all of the programs that are going to need it. Data, we have a lot of data, but we need the ability to harness that data and really give commanders immediate courses of action and solutions and options based on the data that they have.
Hey, Ted, we got about 3 minutes, and I want to throw this question out there so you could quickly comment on it. And the question is, what relationships been like between government and industry in this agile acquisition process? Please incorporate what you want your government and industry partners to know.
I think we should let you guys answer first.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Got about 3 minutes.
Well, I would just to comment on the last question, and I'll move to that. I did want to share just one very concrete example because we were talking about outcomes. So just, what does that mean in practice? I think we frame this in the context of efficiency. I'll tell you, I don't really like the word efficiency. I care more about efficacy. Just to share this, 18th Airborne Corps was doing an AI investment about a year ago, and they were actually able to try to rebuild one of their targeting cells that was aligned with something they were doing under Operation Iraqi Freedom, except with AI capabilities actually assisting that targeting cell, they were able to recreate the lethality of that targeting cell with 20 people when during the operation it actually required 2,000. So what we're seeing here from an efficacy perspective is a 100x increase in lethality due to the right way in which we're actually embedding these capabilities into units. And so the wrong takeaway is, we can actually draw down the number of soldiers that are necessary to achieve that outcome. The right takeaway is that with the right combination of these tools, with the right partnerships, we can actually achieve things like 200x overmatch on our adversaries. And that's really what ultimately this is about. This is why we want to move more quickly. This is the way in which everything that we're talking about here actually becomes a component of the deterrence strategy and a component of national security strategy. To that end, I would say the kind of biggest thing that I've observed in the last couple of years, and what I would encourage the Army to pay attention to, something that Neil touched on, the amount of private capital that is going into new and emerging companies that want to bring their wares and their capabilities into the Army is something that we haven't seen really in the past 50 years. And so that tells question now is whether or not the Army's ready to actually meet the moment, create those markets, and show industry that this talk is serious. And the consequence of that is, even in a constrained fiscal environment and where we're trying to figure out things like fiscal agility, we're going to have access to hundreds of billions of dollars of private capital that actually want to come in and solve these problems, which I just think is one of the most powerful tools that exist in the Army's tool belt right now.
Okay. Neil, we got about 30 seconds.
Yeah, just real quick, I would say the number one thing between the industry and the DoD relationship is 100% engagement. 100% engagement. I'm looking at General Cheney, and we were together in a previous life. When I would get a new officer into the command, I would say your first 90 days is with your industry partner. Don't come here, go there. There is only advantage to being 100% transparent, because almost everything that the material world does is foilable to begin with. It's going to be public record and the dollars that's spent, and they're going to be open source decisions. So let's don't act like that's not true. Let's act like the truth is in front of us, and let's use that truth to help us accelerate. When we, I'll just close with this example. When we used hypersonic weapons, we formed, there were 6 companies that we needed to have contracts to produce the weapon system. And so when we made the contract awards, I called the CEOs in. I said, okay, here's what's going to happen. We're going to have one integrated master schedule, one integrated financials across 6 companies. And they're like, we've never done that before. We're not sure we want to be that transparent with our competimates. And I'm like, it's not a choice. This is what's going to happen if you want to be on this program. For 6 months, it was totally painful, extremely painful. Month 7, it was very, very good. And so I think that transparency, I think we have to embrace it on the industry side. We have to embrace it on the government side, and that means trust, right? It means waking up every day going, look, I think somebody wants to do something good today. Let's do that something good together. And if we can do that, then we'll accelerate the behavior of accelerating technology.
Good job.
It's a great way to end it. Let's hear it for this panel, superb panel. Thank you, Larry. I won't hold you up here. You can leave. Thanks very much. Great job. Hey, a tremendous first day, and really great panels, and really just appreciate the quality of questions coming in. Really incredibly effective. Right now, there's a reception starting now over in the exhibit hall. I'd encourage you till 5 o'clock. Head on over to the exhibit hall and join the reception. There'll also be the Generation Next, the young professionals, are having a gathering in Salon 2, 5 to 7. You're welcome to attend that and see these bright young professionals, 5 to 7. That's sponsored by the Huntsville Redstone AUSA chapter, 5 to 7 tonight. And finally, we'll start tomorrow morning, the 7:30. You'll have the great coffee and breakfast here starting at 7:30. 8:30 we'll start in here. So we will see you tomorrow, or we'll see you at the reception here in a few minutes. Thanks.
You don't know nothing about this filly here.
Nope.
Don't even know her name.
Nope.
Well, I guess that makes this one fortuitous wagon.
I sure as hell hope so.
Major Mark was warned this here's Daisy Domergood.
Here's Wednesday, or do you want to just start?
Yep, so we can start with, it's like, it's, boom. This is the ANC team, SMA. Okay.
All right, hey Brian. Yes, sir. You ready to run through tomorrow the award presentation? Yes. Can you do that?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This will be your 5-minute warning before our program begins. This is your 5-minute warning before our program begins.
All right, folks, good morning. You can do better than that. How about a big hooah? Good morning. All right, that's what I want to hear. Welcome to AUSA's Global Force Symposium and Exposition. I can't tell you how great it is to be back in Huntsville for this important event. What a tremendous crowd. Thank you for being here, not only as we kick off this event, but also celebrate the Army's 250th birthday. I'm Alex Brody. I'm the Director of Meetings at AUSA. General Brown, our President and CEO, is the host for this event. First, we'd like to recognize our premier sponsor for this year's event, Govini, for their tremendous support this week. We can't thank Govini enough for their support of AUSA, not just at this event, but throughout the year. They are a key sponsor at a number of our events this year. Please give Govini a big round of applause. I'd also like to thank One Brief for their generous sponsorship of the coffee service this morning. We all know how vital coffee is every morning, so a big thank you to One Brief for being our sponsor. All right, we have a great lineup for you this morning, but before we blast off, I have a few customary announcements. Your badge. Everyone in the room received a digital access pass. This innovative option provides a quicker way to access our educational forums without having to wait in line for a printed badge. Please note that you do still need a printed badge, though, to go into the exhibit hall. So if you don't have your printed badge yet, please feel free to stop by our main registration counter or any of our satellite kiosks to pick your badge up before going to the exhibit halls. Proceedings, handouts, a link to the slides from our event will be available about a week after the event concludes on our website. Just go under past events, look for this event. You'll find them. If you don't, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to send you any proceedings from this year's event. App. We have a great app again this year. Our app includes the latest agenda, exhibitor list, and is really just a one-stop shop for everything at this event. If you have not already downloaded our app, please do so now. Question cards. We use question cards at our events. So periodically I'll walk around the room. So for any panelists, I'll walk around, ask you to fill this out, and then I'll hand it to the moderator. For our keynote speakers, I'll walk around the room with a microphone. So please start thinking about your questions now. Our panelists, our keynote speakers are ready for your tough questions. Press. We have press at our events, so our ground rules are simple. We're on record. And for attribution. Membership. Who here is a member of AUSA? Please raise your hand. All right. AUSA is a membership organization, so for everyone else, please turn, smile at the cameras. We'll review them later. We'll give you a call. We need your support, so we'll track you down after this year's event. Simply put, we can't do what we do without our members. AUSA has more than 1.8 million members, which is tremendous. Let's give that a round of applause. If you are not already a premium member and would like to join today, please visit our membership booth. You can connect with Angela Quidley in the South Hall foyer, which is near registration. Angela can review your membership plan and all the great benefits that we offer. By joining, you will help AUSA be an effective voice for the total Army and provide support for the soldiers and their families. Also in the South Hall foyer, not far from registration, is the AUSA store. Please stop by when you get a chance and see all the great items we're selling. We have something for everyone, including this bottle of Shock and Awe AUSA hot sauce. Now let's be honest, nothing says Happy Easter like a bottle of AUSA Shock and Awe hot sauce. So please stop by, connect with Desi, and check out all the great items that we have and do your shopping today. Wi-Fi. Internet access is available throughout the building, thanks to our Wi-Fi sponsor, Parsons. To access the Wi-Fi on your personal device, please select the AUSA network, and the password is Parsons. I'd also like to thank all the companies that are exhibiting with us, as well as our sponsors. They are, without a doubt, an integral part of the learning process. This year we have a record number of exhibitors. 225 companies are displaying the latest equipment, products, and services for the Army. Our exhibitors are located in the East Hall, South Hall, and we have a new showcase zone, which is in front of the Saturn Ballroom. These are small to mid-sized companies that are exhibiting for the first time with AUSA. So those are tabletop displays out in front of the Saturn Ballroom, so make sure you get to all of our exhibitors while you're here. Like many of you, they have come a long way to participate in our event, and they are so vital that we have provided dedicated exhibit hall hours. We want to ensure you have plenty of time to connect with our exhibitors. Lunch will be available both today and tomorrow in the exhibit hall. Today's lunch starts at 12:30. And finally, I ask at this point to ensure your mobile devices have been silenced. It is now time to blast off.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the presentation of colors and the singing of our national anthem by Megan White.
I think it's only offensive now.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets regular, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Association of the United States Army, General Robert Brown, United States Army, retired.
All right, well, we're fired up this morning. How's everybody doing? That's pretty good. All right, the coffee's working. So ready to go. But I tell you, we're really so glad to be back here in Huntsville, a tremendous Army town, and really appreciate the amazing support. It's just great to be here for the Global Force Symposium and Exposition. This year's theme, Driving Continuous Transformation for Ready Combat Formations, reflects how the U.S. Army is relentlessly taking new equipment, concepts, and doctrine off the shelf and getting them to where they matter most, lethal combat formations. It is with these formations that innovative ideas become tangible improvements to our Army's readiness, lethality, and adaptability. in the most challenging security environment we have seen in decades. By modernizing equipment, enhancing training, and refining operational concepts at the pace required by the rapid changes of the character of warfare, the Army is strengthening its ability to deter adversaries, respond to crisis, and maintain overmatch in multi-domain operations. With that in mind, as we focus forward on the future here at this exposition and symposium, it's also important to remember the past. And this year celebrates the Army's 250th birthday. From the Revolutionary War to today, America's Army has steadfastly defended the nation before the nation was even born. To honor that commitment and this history of selfless service, please enjoy this short video, This We'll Defend.
From its founding in 1775, the U.S. Army has defended freedom. Older than the nation itself, the Army has been the shield of our nation, democracy, and way of life, standing strong through the battlefields of the past and challenges of today. Throughout our 250-year heritage, the courage and dedication of our brave men and women have shaped us into the world's premier fighting force. Inspired by the next generation of soldiers, we remain committed to modernization, lethality, and readiness to face tomorrow's threats. Join us in celebrating the Army's 250th anniversary, a multi-year campaign as we honor the past and embrace the future on installations around the world and throughout local communities across the nation. Together, we commemorate the Army's legacy, forged in the fires of conflict and defined by courage. The U.S. Army, proudly serving for 250 years. Established June 14, 1775. This will defend.
There's recruiters outside the auditorium. I'm thinking of signing up for another hitch myself. All right, I got new knees, you never know. But a big year, and we're really excited, and just such an honor. 250 years before we were a nation. So before we get started, I really want to recognize the hard work of a lot of folks pulling this together. We've received incredible support from the community here in Huntsville. It's just really overwhelming. It's a great Army community. The City of Huntsville, Huntsville Convention and Visitors Bureau, the local Chamber of Commerce, and tremendous support again across the board. So thanks for your hospitality and all you've done to help us. And we have Mayor Tommy Battle here, an amazing leader. And Mayor, we're looking forward to have a chance for you to say a few remarks.
The Honorable Tommy M. Battle, Jr., elected in 2024 to serve a fifth term, Mayor Tommy Battle is dedicated to creating jobs, diversifying Huntsville's economic base, and enhancing the city's quality of life. He is committed to the recruiting industry, developing the local workforce, and fostering high-quality education. An Alabama native, Mayor Battle moved to Huntsville in 1980 after receiving a business degree from the University of Alabama, and he was elected to the Huntsville City Council to serve as finance chair in 1984. His successful career as an entrepreneur and businessman, along with nearly 30 years of community service, effectively prepared him for the demanding role as the city's chief executive officer, recruiter, and champion of Huntsville's future. Please welcome Mayor Tommy Battle.
Thank you. I was about to say he could go on and on and on. I'd just stand here. I'd be real well received. Love the idea of a blast-off. We are a blast-off city. We believe in countdowns, 3, 2, 1, fire and take off. And we want to say thank you and welcome to Huntsville. You honor us by coming to Huntsville, and we are so glad to have you here in our town. To our active military here, thank you for your service. to our retired military, thank you for what you have done for this country. We hope as you come through Huntsville that you get to know our city a little bit. Everybody out there who is from the Huntsville-Madison County area, raise your hand. Okay, these guys are your hosts. They'll buy drinks, they'll buy dinner tonight. They'll do a whole lot of things for you. So make sure that you pick up each one of them. But as you're here, I hope you have a great time. I hope you get to see Redstone Arsenal. In addition to being an arsenal, it's a center of excellence, where we have 67 different centers of excellence who operate out of Redstone Arsenal. Everything from the FBI to missile defense to Army aviation to Army Material Command. Across the board, we have 67 agencies sitting out there who are working day in and day out to make this country great. And then just to the north of that, we have Research Park, second largest research park in America, which houses more engineers and degree professionals per capita than anywhere else in the U.S. And as you look at Research Park is made so that we can make those center of excellences even stronger. Some of the things that have happened at Redstone Arsenal, the Marshall Space Flight Center, we put together the rockets that took man to the moon and brought man back, and maybe wrote a few footnotes in the pages of history. But also today we're working on the SLS that will take us back into deep space and take us back to Mars. And then we're working on future propulsion systems, things like nuclear thermal propulsion that will take us to Mars and to other planets throughout the solar system. And as we look at all that technology that comes together, there's a great synergy out there. The synergy that makes for a great base, makes for a great arsenal, makes for a great place to have centers of excellence. We hope that as you come here that you have a great time. We are looking forward to the next 3 days. We think that it will be something very enlightening, but thank you for coming to our city. You honor us by being here, and have a great time. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mayor Battle. Really appreciate your amazing hospitality. I'd like to also give a special shout out to the AUSA Huntsville Redstone chapter. They did a ton of work. It's an amazing chapter. We have 122 chapters out there across everywhere our Army is, active, National Guard, and Reserve, and they do so much. But Huntsville Redstone chapter, thanks for all you did to help make this possible. And then our sponsors, again, I just have to also thank, we can't do it without our sponsors. And, they're integral to what we do to help connect, and your support means a ton. Our premier Global Force sponsor for this event, Govini, thank you very much. Again, we could not do it without you. Really appreciate it. I also want to note the presence of representatives from our allied and partner nations. Thanks for being here. That teamwork is incredible. We know it's our advantage out there, so thanks for being here, our allies and partners. We've got also press joining us, and we appreciate you being here. You help get the word out of everything going on and all the great stuff our Army is doing. Likewise, we can't do this without close collaboration with our Army and Army senior leadership. Special thanks to the senior official performing the duties of the Undersecretary of the Army, David Fitzgerald, who is here with us today to provide a few opening remarks.
David R. Fitzgerald, senior official performing the duties of the Undersecretary of the Army, Chief Strategic Advisor to the Secretary of the Army. Mr. Fitzgerald serves as the Army's Chief Operating Officer and Chief Management Officer, helping oversee a budget of more than $185 billion and sharing responsibility for the manning, training, and equipping of nearly 1 million soldiers across the active, Guard, and Reserve components. Please welcome Mr. David Fitzgerald.
Well, good morning to all the soldiers, Army civilians, and industry partners out there. I'm going to have to get more practice like Mayor Battle because I need notes, so that was impressive how you can just rip and rip it. It's great to be at the AUSA Global Force Symposium and Expedition with you all, and I appreciate the chance to share some brief remarks here this morning. Although I am a recovering lawyer, so brief may be a bit aspirational, but I appreciate you all bearing with me. First, I'd like to thank everyone who worked to put on this event, all the folks that General Brown mentioned, the city of Huntsville, but also you, General Brown, and the entire AUSA team. It's a great event, and I'm excited to be here. I'd also like to thank President Trump and the Honorable Dan Driscoll, Secretary of the Army, for their trust and for allowing me the privilege of serving as the SOPDO Under Secretary of the Army for the last few months. It's great to be back in the world of acronyms. SOPDO is a good one. It's truly the professional honor of my life to play a small role in advancing the shared vision of the Secretary and the Chief of Staff of the Army, General Randy George, to transform the Army into a truly modernized and more lethal fighting force. And I have to say, serving in the Secretariat is a remarkably different experience from my last hitch in the Army when I got out as a junior captain in Afghanistan. Definitely a lot cushier this time around. The last few months, though, have given me an entirely different perspective on the reality of the challenges confronting our Army, technical, operational, and financial. I've also had the chance to see firsthand and up close all the amazing work that all the folks in this room do every day to meet those challenges, to support and defend our nation. And it truly is impressive. It truly is. But the headline here is that we have to do more to overtake the rate at which our adversaries are transforming. We have to do it better, we have to do it faster, and we have to do it together. And I think that we all recognize we're at a pivotal moment where the character of warfare itself is changing before our eyes. Our adversaries are moving fast, they are adapting capabilities and leveraging new technologies, which are often subsidized through commercial investment in real time. Now, the concept of transformation in contact, which was initiated by General George and operationalized by our friends at AFC, I think I saw General Rainey here somewhere, that concept rightly recognizes that a transformed, combat-ready Army is not an end state. It is a continual process of working with our warfighters to deliver to them the very latest in scalable and adaptable capabilities that they need to fight, survive, and win on the battlefield of today and tomorrow. We've revolutionized before. The industry and defense partnership has produced technological breakthroughs that shape the modern world. From the Manhattan Project to pioneering GPS and the internet, we can do it again, is the message for today. Euphemisms and platitudes will not get us there, though. We need a very clear-eyed understanding of the current situation, the challenges we face, and we need to fundamentally relook the way that we do business to put America's warfighters on the leading edge of technology. The Secretary of the Army said that we need to act with the purpose and decisiveness of a pre-wartime footing. And the Secretary's articulated three main lines of effort to do just that. First, we need to make the Army a better customer. Army senior leaders will accelerate current efforts to reimagine the way in which the Army produces its requirements documents. We want to unleash the full potential of American ingenuity by promulgating capability-based requirements and describing problem sets, and then allowing the innovators to innovate, rather than prescribing overly restrictive gold-plated wish lists, which I think we are making good headway on that front through AFC. We're going to institutionalize prioritizing outcomes and lower costs, and we need greater resiliency in our supply chains. So in order to facilitate competition and avoid the Army becoming overly wedded to a single system or vendor, we're going to strive to gain greater agility and funding so that we can rapidly shift to better and more cost-effective solutions within a particular family of capabilities. We want to work with you through earlier and more frequent communication and collaboration. So for example, tech leaders and engineers, in our view, should be co-located with the warfighters fielding new capabilities to minimize the feedback iteration loop. So accordingly, Army senior leaders are establishing innovation sandboxes within our brigades and divisions as one simple step to integrate your solutions into the Army faster. And the goal is to afford dedicated spaces where new ideas and technologies can be tested, refined, and validated by real soldiers in real-world conditions. And we welcome open and continuing dialogue with the thought leaders in this space. If there's a better way of doing something, we want to know about it, and we want to know now. Second, we have to eliminate the bureaucratic barriers and outdated systems that hinder transformation and readiness. As a lot of you probably know, at any given time, between 40 and 50% of the Army's budget is fixed in personnel costs. And of course, op-tempo and readiness demands consume another significant percentage of our top line. And the Army has been a significant cash flower of emergent operations around the globe, from Ukraine, Haiti, to the southern border. Meanwhile, continuing resolutions and inflation have further eroded our buying power. So this is all to say, every single dollar counts in the current fiscal environment. We cannot afford to continue robbing modernization by continuing to pay for things we no longer need. And so to address this, we've begun systematically reviewing legacy programs and reevaluating our existing requirements. The Secretary and the Chief of Staff are going to drive the internal culture changes necessary to ensure that the Army is maximizing the use of all authorities available to us to streamline acquisitions, and where necessary, they will secure additional authorities to move faster. We need to rethink the way that we contract. On the battlefield, our soldiers must be able to work on their own equipment, update and adapt it rapidly, and ensure that they remain ahead of the capability counter capability curve. So when the Army buys hardware and equipment, we will own the right to repair and maintain it. Wherever possible and to promote competition, we will look to reward companies who've invested their own dollars in R&D, but where IP is developed through taxpayer-funded R&D, the Army must own that as well. And we have to be able to shift to lower-cost solutions as technologies mature and new market participants emerge. Third, we will continue to transform and contact. As we free up resources through hard choices, we will redirect them toward transformation of the force. The Army's transformation plan is not just about spending differently, it is about thinking differently. We need to modernize how we fight and reshape our formations and capabilities for the future battlefield. And technology, like the ones that we'll see here at this great event, are the cornerstone of that transformation. This is especially true in areas like AI, IT networks, additive manufacturing, and making our decision-making and operations more data-centric. But it's equally true in more traditional warfighting domains for both kinetic and non-kinetic effects. UAS, counter-UAS, electronic warfare, integrated air and missile defense, long-range fires, these are and will remain a priority for immediate and enduring capabilities. But building a culture of innovation at speed and at scale requires a shift in mindset within the Army, DoD writ large, and industry, particularly a higher risk tolerance and an increased willingness to challenge outdated processes. And from what I've observed in my brief but illustrious tenure in SOPTO, I think we have a unique opportunity to capitalize on precisely such a culture shift as consensus grows around a recognition that the old ways of doing business are no longer working. And that is a big challenge. The Army must take a flat or a reduced top-line budget and still modernize and transform its capabilities while improving operational readiness and supporting our soldiers. And if we, and I mean the collective we, get it right, that means more resources for our Army and our warfighters. We have the absolute best soldiers in the world. I would put an American soldier up against anyone, anytime, anywhere. But it's our mandate to ensure that those warfighters have the very best capabilities that American ingenuity can provide to deter and defeat all comers. And this is bigger than just the Army. It's about reinvigorating American pride, where industry and the military come together to not just build products, but to solve the problems that challenge our national security and our national prosperity. That's the challenge. We need to meet it together. The Secretary is asking for your buy-in. I am here telling you why it's imperative. So let's move faster, let's think bigger, and let's make sure that the next great revolutionary breakthrough happens right here with us. The future's not waiting, our adversaries aren't waiting, neither will we. So thank you. I look forward to meeting everybody over the next couple days, and be all you can be.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald, for those opening remarks. Now it's time for the Gregg Award presentation.
The U.S. Army runs on logistics. Behind every mission, every deployment, and every victory lies a complex network of supply chains, transportation, and unwavering support. This is the legacy of Lieutenant General Arthur J. Gregg, a man whose career epitomized excellence in Army logistics. The Army established the Lieutenant General Arthur J. Gregg Sustainment Leadership Award in 2015 to recognize individuals who have made significant contributions to Army sustainment operations. From his early days as a young enlisted soldier to his culminating role as the Army's Deputy Chief of Staff for Logistics, General Gregg exemplified strategic vision and unwavering dedication. He led with a focus on modernization and efficiency, always striving to ensure that soldiers had the resources when and where they needed them. General Gregg passed on August 22, 2024, but his impact resonated far beyond his time in service. He spearheaded initiatives that revolutionized Army logistics, leaving a lasting mark on the way the force operates today. His relentless pursuit of excellence laid the foundation for a more agile and responsive logistical framework capable of supporting the Army's evolving mission around the globe. These leaders are the problem solvers, the strategic thinkers, and the dedicated professionals who ensure that the Army's logistical machine runs smoothly, even in the most challenging of circumstances. They carry the torch of General Gregg's legacy, ensuring the Army delivers material from the installation to the point of need. Echoing the timeless dedication of General Gregg, the Army as a unified force orchestrates the seamless flow of material. From the organic industrial base to the dynamic front lines of multi-domain and large-scale combat operations, this vital sustainment underwrites every mission, ensuring operational triumph.
Welcome to the 10th presentation of the Lieutenant General Arthur J. Gregg Sustainment Leadership Award. We extend a warm welcome to all our industry partners, military members, both active and retired, and friends of the community. Thank you for joining us as we present this prestigious Sustainment Leadership Award. The Department of the Army Deputy Chief of Staff, G4, established the Lieutenant General Arthur J. Gregg Sustainment Leadership Award in 2015 and first awarded it in 2016 to recognize individuals who have made significant and measurable contributions to Army sustainment operations. These individuals are influential logistics leaders who have made unparalleled contributions to enhance operating efficiencies and improve resource management in support of Army sustainment and readiness, as voted on by a board of senior military and Department of the Army civilian representatives. Although the winners are not able to join us here today, we are honored to recognize their outstanding achievements and contributions. Their dedication to sustainment operations has left a lasting impact, and we celebrate their success in their absence. We will ensure they receive this prestigious award with our deepest appreciation at a later date. The first recipient of the Lieutenant General Arthur J. Gregg Award is Major Sean McLaughlin. Major McLaughlin currently serves as the Transportation Officer for the 25th Infantry Division. He set new theater records for joint mobility by deploying over 400 pieces of equipment and 1,500 soldiers, airmen, and Marines to 3 Pacific Islands through 184 fixed-wing air movements, 40 rotary-wing air movements, and 12 sea movements, including the largest aerial delivery operation in Hawaii's history. His profound impact on the Army and its sustainment operations will continue to inspire and guide future generations of leaders. Major McLaughlin epitomizes what a senior transportation officer is in today's Army. The next recipient of the Lieutenant General Arthur J. Gregg Sustainment Leadership Award is Mr. Jason Henry. Mr. Henry currently serves as the Installation Supply Division Chief for 406th Army Field Support Brigade, Army Sustainment Command. Mr. Henry managed over $25 million in fiscal requirements without interruption to baseline services. He effectively cross-leveled material handling and dining facility equipment to address mission requirements, mitigate risks, and reduce costs to the government. His efforts significantly optimized operations across a geographically dispersed footprint. Mr. Henry has made significant contributions to Army sustainment operations through his dedication and exceptional leadership. He embodies the values of integrity, professionalism, and selfless service. His impact on sustainment operations will continue to inspire and guide future generations of leaders. The last recipient of the Lieutenant General Arthur J. Gregg Sustainment Leadership Award is Mr. John Hall. Mr. Hall currently serves as the Defense Commissary Agency Director and Chief Executive Officer. Mr. Hall played a pivotal role in shaping a smarter, data-driven approach to resource management by overseeing the creation and implementation of a comprehensive program objective memorandum process. He ensured that over $60 billion was effectively distributed across 93 vital sustainment programs. Mr. Hall's strategic leadership has not only improved operational efficiency, but also ensured the Army is always ready to be the cornerstone of logistics for the joint force in any situation, whether it's competition, crisis, or conflict. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's presentations. Be all you can be. This will defend. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome AUSA Vice President for Membership and Meetings, Brigadier General Retired Jack Haley.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to have you. That was phenomenal, and that was just the blast-off. We have a great lineup for you this year with exceptional speakers for our keynotes, our contemporary military forums and fireside chats, and our always very popular Warriors Corner. These all have a focus on the future of America's Army. Throughout our events each day, your questions are vitally important, adding great value to our program. Also, while you're here, please take advantage of the extended time we've set aside on the agenda to visit the exhibit hall floor. The exhibitors tell the other half of the Army's future. They are an integral part of the professional development opportunities we offer at the Global Force Symposium and Exposition. And lastly, I'd like to share that our fantastic Redstone Huntsville chapter is hosting a young professionals reception this evening. Of course, the annual Blowout Rocket City Bash tomorrow night, which is always a sellout, and concluding our event with an ROTC panel and luncheon on Thursday. So due to some unforeseen circumstances, we had to adjust the schedule a bit with General Rainey so General Rainey will now provide his keynote address Thursday morning at 09. So we're going to move this morning's fireside chat up into his slot. We've also moved the media roundtable that was previously scheduled for 10:30 this morning to 15:30 this afternoon in Salon 1. So today's fireside chat features Lieutenant General David Hodney. You guys can come up. Director, Futures and Concepts Center, U.S. Army Futures Command, along with Brigadier General Zachary Miller, Commanding General, U.S. Army Joint Modernization Command. Their discussion will be focused on concept-focused experimentation, and Megan Metzger, the CEO of Decode, will be the moderator. Ms. Metzger, the floor is yours.
Brilliant. All right, welcome. So if we can't have General Rainey, I think we're doing pretty well. This is the best way to start the day. It takes two of them to equal General Rainey. I am so excited to be here. Good morning, Huntsville. Welcome to what's going to be an incredible couple of days. I'm really excited about this topic. Like I said, my name's Megan Metzger. I am the CEO of Decode, and I'm really passionate about closing the gap between the speed of technology and the mission for our warfighters. So before we jump into it, just to tee it up, I think we heard it this morning, brilliantly said, American soldiers, anytime, anywhere. And to keep doing that, that requires ingenuity of everyone in this room, the Army, and really, the future's not waiting. So what a better way to tee up the topic. So we're going to talk about experimentation today. Sounds great? Okay, so first, I want to level set with the room and make sure everyone's on the same sheet of music. So kick us off, sir, if you don't mind, on what is experimentation. Give us some of the terminology and make sure that we really know what it is that we're talking about this morning.
That's great. Thanks, Megan. First off, no, it's great. The one good thing about taking General Rainey's time slot is people couldn't exit the room before the fireside chat at 10 o'clock. So we've got a full house to get everyone excited about experimentation. So I'm Dave Hodney. I'm the director of the Futures and Concepts Center and also a deputy of Army Futures Command. If you want to send me cards and letters, please don't send them to Austin. I'm at Fort Eustis, Virginia, with my team there. So, and I've got my.
Unless it's a complaint, send those to Austin.
Yeah. So I'm at Fort Eustis, Virginia, and there we do all things requirements for the Army, concepts and experimentation, and we're here to talk about experimentation. So, we just came off Project Convergence, Capstone 5, Part A, and General Rainey talks a lot about persistent experimentation. It occurs throughout the year. Right now, we're on day 18 of what's essentially a 75-day sprint that will go through May, and that's defined by Project Convergence Part A that just concluded at the National Training Center, Project Convergence Part B that will conduct forward in Indo-PACOM. The difference with what we did with the joint portion of Project Convergence this year is our experimentation venue will encompass a geographical region as far west as the Philippines, as far east as Tahiti, and as far north as Japan, and as far south as Australia. So we certainly are excited about what's coming in the next few weeks in that. And then the third component of our experimentation is the Army's Title X War Game. It used to be called Unified Quest, Unified Challenge Series War Games. Now it's called Future Studies Program. And that will take us right to May 21st. And we'll wrap up before Memorial Day weekend and obviously the Army's 250th birthday celebration. So to your question, Megan, experiments are not exercises. Exercises focus on today's readiness. They have clear training objectives. They're today's formations with their capabilities. There's an element of free play, test the full range of capabilities, and allows leaders at echelons to make decisions to challenge problems and make sure they're skilled in their mission essential tasks. Experiments are focused on experimentation objectives, not training objectives. They're also focused on future readiness, and there's a little bit of the learning demands, unlike the free play and exercise and an experiment. There's really controlled environments to make sure we can test our hypotheses, make sure we can get the learning, achieve the learning demands and answer the questions we're seeking to pursue. So the experiments we're hosting are really important to the future readiness of our Army, and I'm certainly proud to be a part of it.
Absolutely. So from your perspective too, from the kind of the joint modernization, what's your role in the experimentation? Kind of add on to its critical nature of it.
Sure, thanks, Megan, and great to be here. We at Joint Modernization Command do most of the kind of large scale in the dirt type experiments. Project Convergence Capstone is the kind of most known one. As General Hodney had said, Scenario 8 is concluded at National Training Center. So we really convene the team is one way I look at it. This portion that we did at National Training Center had about 4,000 participants from across the Joint Force. And in order to put that together, we need a lot of help. And we had coordination from NASA to the NSA and from ASALT to the Air Force headquarters. You name it, they were out there trying to help put it together. The real secret, I think, is that our cross-functional teams and our capability developers from our centers of excellence are really the ones that are at the locus of understanding whether or not the technologies and the operating concepts we brought together are performing as we had anticipated, and then finding what we can learn from that and making sure that that gets fed back into the machinery that is delivered and transformation in contact.
Well, and you hit on something about the team, and I wanted to pull that thread a little bit, because one of the things that stood out to me is when we talk about experimentation, it's not just about the technologies and making sure that they work. You're also bringing in the operations centers, all the forms you have to fill out, you name it.
Yeah.
What else goes into it from every function?
Unlike in past years, and I'll steal General Hani's line that it was like sticks lanes in the desert where we had a bunch of kind of discrete experiments all occurring. This year it looked actually a lot more like a operation would, or a National Training Center rotation would. We had a joint forcible entry, we had an attack, and we had a defense. And so we were able to execute that from the core echelon, 18th Airborne Corps, all the way down to the platoon level. And to put that together is much more than just a normal National Training Center rotation, as you might imagine. We had forces from all corners of the Army. And then we had folks like, because since it was the Corps, we had to fight in the deep. So we had the Air Force up at the Nevada Testing Training Range in Nellis Air Force Base. We had the maritime component off the coast of San Diego and San Clemente Island, which included everything from SEAL Team 1 to Army and Air Force Special Operations Forces to even the 11th MEU from the Marine Corps. So if we don't bring all those together, we can't really test whether or not the capabilities we've assembled are going to allow us to meet our warfighting needs for the future from the core down.
So you hit on something, and I'm going to flip the next question to you, sir. It sounds like we are adapting and changing the way that we do experimentation. So we used to have big singular events, and we've really evolved. And part of the theme for this conference is continuous transformation. So how else have we changed experimentation to keep up and really kind of meet that continuous transformation spirit?
Yeah, thanks, Megan. So you talked about the core and below. So I'll start with Project Convergence and the adjustments we've made there. So I was a CFT director, soldier lethality CFT for the first Project Convergence. That was essentially a bottom-up experiment. CFT directors, we were pursuing capabilities, and the solutions we were pursuing, we realized if we didn't coordinate with each other, we would actually potentially go in different directions. So Ross Kaufman actually gets the credit. He was the next gen combat vehicle CFT director, also former COG at the NTC. He's the one who said, hey, we need to probably bring our stuff together to make sure in the Army, the CFT directors could link sensors and shooters with the technology we're pursuing. Wally Rugen, Future Vertical Lift CFT. John Rafferty was a long-range precision fire CFT, and I, of course, was pursuing capabilities. So that's what converging our capabilities was, where we developed that. That was the first one. We've now done 5 Project Convergences. You could see the evolution. The second one, we partnered with Marines and Air Force, elements that were doing their own, pursuing their own, modern capabilities or modernized capabilities. So they joined us, and Coalition of the Willing. The third year, we partnered with Five Eye Allies. So now we had, some joint capacity and allied participation. The fourth and fifth year, we elevated to combatant command participation. And the difference between the fourth and the fifth year, again, it was sticks lanes in the desert for the NTC portion, where we looked at capabilities isolated from each other. So we had a medical lane to evaluate medical capabilities. We had a human-machine integration, like small-scale attack that was really battalion and below. And at the joint portion of it, we had all of the joint headquarters that Zach described, Indo-PACOM, components, et cetera, all sitting on Camp Pendleton in tents that were 50 yards apart from each other. So if we had issues in the execution of our command and control, we could walk across the dirt and just talk to each other and then ask why the ones and zeros weren't passing. So that was last year. This year, the convergence still occurred where we integrated warfighting systems, but I think that the bigger convergence was centered around the core, U.S. Army Corps Joint Task Force Headquarters. So Part A, Corps and below. Can the Corps conduct data-centric command and control from the Corps level JTF all the way down to the edge being the rifle squad on point? Part B is Corps and above, all the way to the Corps JTF integrating in with the combatant command, and we're going to do it across the geographical distances I described. There won't be any walking across the street from Tahiti to the Philippines to make sure the ones and zeros, so assured data, assured communications, tactical, operational, strategic distances. So if we can converge that data-centric command and control from the combatant command to the Corps and the Corps to the squad, we can converge that capability from the squad all the way to the combatant command. We can be far more effective. So that's how we've adjusted. If people are wondering, why Part A, why Part B, why we've done that. We've partnered in the last two with the OSD's CDAO, the Chief Data Artificial Intelligence Analytics Office. They're working the Combined Joint All-Domain Command and Control Solutions. That partnership with the experimentation series called GUIDE, Global Information Dominance Experiment. I'll try to save you from acronym hell as we go through that. But we partnered with them. That was GUIDE 9. That yielded the min viable product. Again, Joint Modernization Command, one-of-a-kind organization convening this Army-hosted joint experiment, yielded the min viable product for CJAD C2, and that's what we're running Part B on that architecture. So I'm really excited about Part B and solving those problems.
So if I were to kind of say it back to you, it sounds like data is king, and we're really flipping the script so that we are focusing on how data can drive that connectivity at every single echelon.
Yeah, I'm going to quote
That sounds
Pat
game
Ellis.
changer.
Yeah, I'll quote Pat Ellis. He's the one who, he's the command and control cross-functional team director. It's, it's about moving data, and if you can move data, you can move your voice. So voice over internet protocol. So, think traditional radios, not having to do that and moving our voices via data.
So you're talking about how we're now running it at echelon. That's fantastic. You've talked a little bit about it requires everyone coming together across the joint services or coalition partners, and you want to practice like you want to compete, right? So talk to me a little bit about how we not only have we changed the way that we're structuring our experimentation, but we're fighting a different fight now. We've been in the desert for a while. We've learned a lot from Ukraine. We're going out to Indo-PACOM. How are we also adapting experimentation to be in those environments? Talk a little bit more about the world aspect of it in the joint.
Yeah, I'll take that, Zach. I mentioned Future Studies Program, the Title X War Game. We've been doing that. Last year, I spoke. I've graduated from the Warriors Corner of the Fireside Chat. I was down in the hallway there, and I talked about the taxonomy of experimentation. I did that with my teammate Steph Ahern. She was my director of concepts. 4 years of experimentation on the Army warfighting concept and the Title X War Game, and we've certainly learned a few fundamental aspects of how we're going to fight that shape our experimentation. So the first, we know, back to your comment about data, we know we have to fight to conduct command and control. We can't assume that we're just going to be able to execute command and control. We're in denied environments, et cetera. So our ability to conduct C2, communicate with assured communications over tactical, operational, strategic distances. We also have to counter the enemy's ability to command and control. That happens, offensively, targeting the enemy's ISR, their reconnaissance complex, targeting their C2 nodes, targeting their strike complex. That goes without saying. That's one sure way to counter their command and control. The other is like blue actions, friendly actions we take to deceive, to obscure in all domains, to make sure the enemy doesn't understand exactly what we're doing. So C2 and counter C2 is something we've got to do. The other thing we've learned in the Future Studies Program is that traditional fire and maneuver is insufficient. We have to conduct what's called cross-domain fires and expanded maneuver. Cross-domain fires are not joint fires. They're not fires that are delivered by other services. We still are going to fight as a joint force. The Army plays a critical role in that. But these are Army fires delivered in other domains. Land fires against maritime targets, land fires against space targets, all domains, cross-domain, and commanders at echelon have to be comfortable with that. And even platoon leaders today, Red Air back in the day was looking at enemy manned helicopters and aviation assets. And then there was a period in time where platoon leaders and company commanders, frankly, weren't looking above them. Now, every platoon leader that's watching, feeds of fights in Ukraine know they have to look above them. And platoon leaders know cross-domain fires, their ability to, deliver land fires to defeat aerial targets is important. Expanded maneuver, the changing character of war, expanded maneuver, time, space, and purpose. The traditional area of operations is going to look different in multiple dimensions. So platoon leaders operating unmanned systems in what used to be the company commander's AO, the area of influence or area of interest is now absolutely something that someone, the lower echelon can deliver effects. So expanded maneuvers, another lesson we've learned. And the last one, Megan, is formation-based layered protection. We can't assume we're going to be able to, we have to fight our way to operate and protecting our formations at every echelons and the aspects of it. Again, core and below, formation-based layered protection at the core level looks different than formation-based layered protection for a platoon or a squad. It looks different for how our sustainment formations deliver, commodities and contested logistics environments. So, certainly profound lessons that shape how we have to experiment.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll flip the question over to you. I know when we were speaking in the green room, we talked about kind of how we are experimenting around the world. We're bringing in partners, we're bringing in the other services. You mentioned Army capabilities, but that's only a fraction of the fight. So tell me a little bit more about kind of what you're seeing and how you're thinking about this differently.
Sure. So the other services are in the same journey that we're in. And that's the reason, first and foremost, we partner with the equivalent of Futures Command or FCC for those services. But when I look at, for example, the ability in the Pacific for all the services to be able to put their sensors together so that it doesn't matter who is detecting a threat, the best positioned service or capability will be an effect on that. And in other cases, it takes a combination of effects to get a really tough to target enemy force. Because we're doing that, we can't all go in the same direction, in separate directions, much like General Hodney said when they first started Capstone. That was just the Army trying to solve that problem. Now we're trying to do that across the Joint Force. The Special Operations Force is another great example. Great partnership this year with USASOC, the Special Operations Command from the Army. They were not off doing their own excursion. They were both in the Pacific, I guess it was the Pacific, San Clemente Island, but also in National Training Center in the deep. And they were actually facilitating what turned out later to be during the attack a breach. So we had a fully autonomous breach that was done, and part of that was at the right time hitting certain enemies' capabilities, denying them their ability to use satellites, those types of things. And so recognizing that we're going to have to, any number of scenarios that could come up that we'll have to fight across services, across kind of niche capabilities that don't necessarily combine on a day-to-day basis.
So I think traditionally experimentation has had a little bit of a flair of we need to do a demonstration for senior leadership and show them kind of what we're capable of. But I'm getting the sense that that's changing. We're actually trying to kick the tires on things and really test if they're working. Yeah. How do we measure that? What are we getting wrong? What are we getting right? What are we learning?
Yeah, I joked, if you only came out one day to this last Project Convergence, a lot of people, the chief was there one day with the new secretary, and you would think we're running a little bit of an AUSA there. Because we do show all these different capabilities and the things we've been doing, but that belies the complexity and the integrated nature of what the actual experiment is. And so, yes, we do have a lot of capabilities that are sort of on demonstration and that we have to have something physical to experiment with. This is not a conceptual exercise. And so that has to happen. But what really we're trying to do is figure out, are the things we're asking for in our future force, do they meet the requirements that we're going to need, the capabilities we're going to need to be able to fight in the future? And in many cases, we're adjusting, I think just our first pass over after Capstone Scenario A was that there's about 35 requirements documents that need to be updated based on things that we saw there that we got to tweak them in such a way that when we do go to procure these things for the Army at large, that we're getting after the right sets of capabilities. That's just one example of kind of how that's changed.
Can I add to that? So Zach referred, it said it felt like an NTC rotation. I think it was like an NTC rotation times 10. Having been a senior trainer at the National Training Center as division commander and coaching your brigade combat team through that. This one was core and below. So I know divisions are in the dirt now for CTCs, but 18th Airborne Corps, 82nd Airborne Division, and in multiple brigades. First, 11 AD and 182 from the 82nd were out there. But in addition to being a senior trainer and organizing, coalescing around integrated warfighting systems, we also had to make sure our experimentation learning demands were met. So in some cases, when a unit didn't necessarily employ the technology in the manner the capability developer envisioned, some of it's like, okay, that's great, we need to write a requirement document or adjust it because we got some great feedback. But in some cases, we had to make sure we realize the learning demand to test that hypothesis. Interestingly enough, the secretary and the chief came when I think it was like 40-mile-an-hour winds,
It hailed.
the weather was,
You really
freezing.
served up the weather that day.
Right. So we had to actually, they came on a day when we had to, nimbly adjust our experimentation to make sure we can meet those learning demands and the weather that preceded it. I think we saw all 4 seasons in NTC to include snow for a couple of days, so it was certainly exciting times. But we can make adjustments. And to your question about things that might have fell short, the interesting thing, when we did the Styx lanes in the desert, some things worked exactly as intended, but when we had to do it, as an integrated warfighting system and actually have them fight in, a real Op 4, 11th ACR was employing the full weight of their capabilities against those formations. Some things actually, when everything was put together in a fight, you realized it might have fell short.
Yeah, just one example that comes to mind when we did the joint forcible entry, and we had done portions of this last year, but we kind of maybe move some stuff there ahead of time. This year it was done by air assault, by helicopter. So we had to move 2 battalions worth of combat power and this technology. One, first the 504th, the Red Devils from the 82nd Airborne Division, and then 2 Royal Yorks from the British Army. They had a lot of technologies that are not, that were foreign to them, but we know they're helpful in that type of an environment. So now we're getting feedback from battalion commanders, brigade commanders, division commanders, and their staffs about, well, how would I prioritize this? Does a robot go on the very first helicopter that goes in? We had a technology called Joint Forcible Entry Radar, something that gives a commander on the ground during a joint forcible entry an air picture. So this is a battalion commander now that has an air picture out a pretty good distance. So that takes up space, that takes operators, but it was a critical thing. So, what are the trade-offs that have to be made? And that's just one example of many that we get that feedback from, and then we can just, maybe there's a different form factor that's necessary. Maybe it needs to communicate a different way because the transport's not available, et cetera.
So you're bringing up something I thought was really interesting. So I had the pleasure, I'll call it, to experience all 4 seasons out in the box. But what struck me is how the large number of partners that are required to get this done. So we have industry here in the room. You had commercial tech companies. You had your industrial base that has the operational context. You had contracting staff. It was fascinating to see. What role should industry take in this new way of experimenting the frequency? And it sounds like it's okay to bring stuff that might need tweaking and fail, whereas before that might not have been the case.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question, Megan. So, we want you to be on this journey with us. So, and we have made adjustments. So I talked about the C2 and counter C2, cross-domain fires, expanded maneuver, formation-based layer protection. The way we experiment right now, and last year when I, talked to the Warriors Corner about the taxonomy experimentation, I referenced the Army-focused warfighting experiments. Many folks are familiar with the experiments that occur at centers of excellence, things like AUE, which is the Army Expeditionary Warrior Experiment, SMEX, the Sustainment Modernization Experiment, MFIX, the Maneuver Fires Integrated Experiment at Fort Sill, Vanguard, the intelligence, those were they were COE focused because we were looking at capabilities in warfighting functions. Now we've got to look at capabilities and how they integrate across warfighting systems. So in fiscal year 26, the next year, we've reorganized how we're going to do those experiments. So we'll start the year with our Title 10 war game, like we do every year in November. We'll start that. The first experiment will be the C2 and counter C2 experiment. That'll be in the early spring timeframe. It's built around the foundation that was Vanguard. Yuma, Arizona provides exceptional, range capabilities that allow us to test the full range of C2 and counter C2 capabilities. And that'll be essentially organized from the theater to the brigade level. So if you have technologies that are in the C2, counter C2 at those echelons and want to participate in that experiment, that's where that occurs. The next one is the cross-domain fires experiment. So where that was traditionally, MIFIX, the Maneuver Fires Integrated Experiment at Fort Sill, cross-domain fires, all manners of fires, launched effects, rocket Cannon, and all these are live and in sim, by the way. That'll occur at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, after the C2, counter C2, SIFWE, AWE, which will expand to be what's called the expanded maneuver, and that'll occur at Fort Benning. That'll be in the spring time frame, the April time frame, and that will also include, launched effects, autonomous systems, human-machine integrated formations, and layered on top of all of them will be formation-based layer protection. So we know we've got the aspects of formation-based layer protection from the higher echelons will look different in terms of air defense systems, survivability systems, our approach to that, to the brigade and below at Fort Benning will look different. We'll then go to we do 2 FSPs a year. We'll do the second Future Studies program. We'll be able to incorporate the learning that occurred in those 3 concept-focused experiments. And then the capstone convergence event will occur in the summer. So convergence right now occurred in the spring, and like AWE starts today at Fort Benning. So we did a lot of the things that it's just, we've got some adjustments to make. I think it'll help us out, it'll help industry out. With a more coherent approach to our experimentation.
And for the industry partners that are looking to support these types of experiments, I think the best way in is still the folks that you know and love, our capability developers, our cross-functional teams, the people at the centers of excellence. It's going to be a lot more focused. I did a talk in Austin some months ago, and in prep for that, I was looking up for kind of where the requests were that we were putting out for those, and they're all over the place. Some are in SAMS.gov, some are in some other bespoke databases. So there's also an effort to kind of consolidate the kind of call for proposals that will meet the needs based on the learning demands that we have. So I think that's going to be a lot more coherent starting in FY26, and those events then will help us inform what we want to do in the big capstone one in July, and make sure that we've got the capabilities that are really helping us meet those needs.
Yeah, and I think I could not double down more on pay attention to those things, because all of this is in the spirit of continuous transformation. So the frequency, the ability to not just adapt the systems, but even our programmatic, so that we can move with that speed. That will be important to take note of, because it's changing, and it's changing fast. Now, I wanted to kind of ask the question a little bit differently. You listed out some fantastic areas for industry to get involved, but 2030 shows up tomorrow. Everyone panic. Where do we have a ways to go? And what are the biggest opportunities that you think we haven't yet tackled?
I think, energy solutions. I think, we described the all things autonomy, unmanned systems, communications systems. So I think what we'll see certainly in the expanded maneuver and the cross-domain fires experimentation, we'll certainly see, any help in that area would certainly be important. Dynamic spectrum management is certainly again, when we put all of those systems together on the battlefield, integrated warfighting systems, and saw robots, we're not going to get any more spectrum, and saw how units had to on the fly, the paragraph 5 command and signal paragraph I wrote as a young lieutenant, succession of command and red and green star clusters. Today's command and signal paragraph in terms of dynamic spectrum management, when your systems are going to have access to the spectrum, our ability to manage that will be certainly critical.
Absolutely. Okay, same question.
Yeah, I think, and there's a separate panel that is going to be hosted on next generation command and control, but the future is unlimited there in terms of what types of applications people can bring to the fight. And it's an extensible open architecture. We had graduates of the software factory, AFC software factory, embedded as part of operational data teams in 18th Airborne Corps headquarters, and those smart captains and sergeants were writing code to make use of the data that was being brought into next generation command and control. And so there's going to be some level of applications that industry is going to have to help out with on those. I'll double down on the spectrum thing. We spent months and months and months maximizing the amount of spectrum. The reason I said NASA before is because they actually gave us some of their spectrum that they use to monitor like deep space satellites. Voyager type stuff. So we did every single thing we could to like wrest the last little bit of spectrum out. But the truth is, there is no formation in our military today that needs the type of spectrum like land operations in the 2030 to 2040 timeframe. And so the ability to secure the actual transport, the transmission of this data, I'm not talking about ComSec, I'm talking about actually making sure that the communication itself is reliable, has multi modes to move, doesn't use too much bandwidth when it doesn't need to use too much bandwidth. We've got a lot of work to do in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of a rapid fire. Okay, so rapid, guys, we can do this. Most impactful thing you saw out at PCC 5?
Next Gen C2. Watching a armored battalion conduct an attack across the central corridor in a distance that would have required any unit today to use 2 retrans sites, and they were able to, assured communication, cut through the OPFOR hot knife through butter because they could see the situational awareness that plotted the enemy locations, and platoon leaders, company commanders, battalion commander talking uninterrupted voice over internet. I think that was my rapid fire response.
Go check out the Warriors Corner.
Yes,
too.
absolutely.
Okay.
All right, I'll tee up another Warriors Corner. Precision logistics, so the precision sustainment. Tanks, M1 tanks, automatically sending their fuel, their ammunition status, and maintenance codes over existing transport methods as frequent as the commander wants them, all integrated into an app, in this case on Next Gen C2, that would let a commander see the exact status without a single log stat report having to go in, and then make decisions about what he could do with his fighting force and how he would need to sustain it.
I want to do another round.
Oh, we were supposed to be
guys. Direct support fires technology. Direct support fires technology, another Warriors Corner you need to sit in on today. Smaller form factor DevCom effort, rockets that, from increase the rate of fire from the cannon to the launcher. Listen in on that Warriors Corner.
Okay.
No, I get another one if he gets another.
Oh, come on. You guys are killing me.
Collaborative autonomy, also Warriors Corner on that later. So launched effects in UAVs, given mission type orders, communicating together about who's going to detect it, who's going to verify it, who's going to kill it, all on their own. And a bonus one to end this round, a completely autonomous breach. So breaching.
An engineer can't talk about that.
Okay, fine.
I'm going to get fired up about.
I'm going to drop your mic. Is what I'm going to do.
The watching the unit conduct a 2-lane breach of a wire mine obstacle, completely autonomous. The bulb system, which essentially deployed UAS systems Goblin identified the minefield. UAS systems launched the enemy side of the minefield, worked their way backwards, and essentially a slice chart, or the slice, which was a UAS that delivered a line charge. Anyone who's seen a MICLIC fire and the rocket might potentially go off center of where you intended to breach. A precision UAS delivering a line that then dropped the line charge filled with slurry and breached to connect that line charge. I've never seen that system before. Bottom-up innovation, 20th Engineers, have been working on that for some time now. Got to showcase that at Project Convergence, and Chris Beck and team from the Maneuver Sports Center certainly supported.
You're an honorary engineer now, sir. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so it wasn't rapid, but your enthusiasm, it's in all sincerity.
Thanks. Sorry about that.
I do love it. So then I'll make it a little harder. Rapid. Name the most underrated emerging technology that will impact experimentation, and it can't be something you've already said.
I think I'm going to say DSFT, but for a different aspect. I talked about the speed of rocket fire. I think about the potential about rounds doing both offensive and defensive fires. Same missile. That'll be groundbreaking.
All right, I'll stick on my sustainment bent, but this is something we probably need help with industry on. Wearable sensors for folks that are injured. We've 2 years in a row we've been out there. I think we got a ways to go on that, but that's potentially a game changer for the people who are injured on the battlefield, to be able to transmit data and key vital signs back immediately to every level of care.
Awesome. Okay. If you had to be stationed at any base in the world permanently, where would it be?
Fort Eustis, Virginia. Love where you are.
Fort Bliss, Texas, home of the Joint Modernization Command and the 1st Armored Division.
All right. I was seeing if you all were paying attention this morning. Okay, I'm going to do just one last question because we've got a whole stack that will flip to you, but what have I not asked you? What is something that you're really passionate about that you want to make sure the audience takes away from this talk?
One, integrating these systems together into a coherent warfighting experiment was invaluable. We'll continue to pattern all of our experimentation after that, and then do pay close attention to the Warriors Corner. I think every one of the CFT directors and the CDIs that are participating in those are going to absolutely highlight, this most recent Project Convergence experiment.
Fantastic.
When you take the work that was done for almost 4 years in the Future Studies program, which was, wargaming, some level of simulation, conceptually it works. We think it fits the mold for the 2040 timeframe for both capabilities that we'll have and that our adversaries will have. It's a whole other thing when you actually try to do those things. In a simulation, the digits flow like they need to, for example. That doesn't always work when you're out in the dirt. And certainly when you're converging so many new capabilities, in some cases the people operating aren't familiar with them, it's a huge challenge, which actually gives me a lot of hope because in a very relatively small amount of time, we were able to make those things work. And we were able to learn about where we still have gaps that we need to fill. And so I think as we continue through this experimentation journey, it's going to get more and more refined every year and that we will be able to deliver those capabilities.
That's incredible. The speed, the learning, the iteration, it's really driving after continuous transformation, and it's just fantastic to see. I'm going to flip through these, and we've got a pretty hefty amount, so we'll make our way through, and it's all dependent on if I can read the handwriting. All right, are we ready?
Yep.
This one's for Lieutenant General Hodney. With the multitude of experiments you described, how is the Army assessing and integrating lessons and findings so the results are not sidelined or siloed? Sorry.
Siloed? Yeah, I think that's the whole purpose of organizing in this manner. So it's not like right now it's siloed. And we integrated Vanguard and Edge, 2 experiments. Edge was a CFT experiment, Future Vertical Lift CFT. Vanguard, as I described, was an Intel CDID, Intel COE experiment. They didn't occur exactly overlap, but there was like a week of each experiment that overlapped. So we forced that over, we used an micro HAB curtain over essentially the state of Arizona that informed, collaborative autonomous behaviors at Yuma Proving Grounds. That was like coordination we did in, kind of at the last minute. Now, if we do a C2 counter C2 experiment that feeds a cross-domain fires experiment, that feeds an expanded maneuver experiment, all of these capability developers will be participating at varying degrees. So it's to exactly do the opposite. It's to break down those silos.
Great. Okay, next question. When will we begin to see significant levels of contested log experimentation, and what is holding us back?
So there is no separate, those 3 examples that General Hodney gave, there is no separate logistics one, but this also goes back to your point about how do we not silo these types of things. That's kind of what was done before. And we found that quite a bit of sustainment tech that might have done really well, or maybe didn't look like it did that well when it was in an isolated experiment, when we brought it in and put it in the hands of the ultimate users, not just the logistics community, but also the commanders of our combat formations and their staffs, we learn a lot more. So I don't think, there'll always be some level of experimentation, like does this thing work or not? But the whole point is to bring them, once they're mature enough, and put them in an operational context that really lets us learn, like, is this really solving a problem that we have or not?
Can I add to that too? So like I mentioned, C2 counter C2 cross-domain fires, expanded maneuver, formation-based layer protection. Wrapped around all of that is intelligence and sustainment. So sustainment challenges, just like formation-based layer protection challenges, will vary based on the echelon you're talking about. The contested logistics CFT is a couple of years old. I think it's 2 years old, pretty soon, if not now. They actually demonstrated some pretty compelling contested logistics, experimentation learning demands between the autonomous tactical vehicle sustainment that was, 1, transiting echelons in the desert, the NTC, and then 2, even working on how to integrate and, partner with other autonomous systems to include, fires, the autonomous multi-domain launcher. Watching that was pretty impressive.
And that sounds like that goes to what you're talking about, like continuously removing the silos. We're doing more integrated experimentation.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds
because sustainment's included in every one of those experiments.
Fantastic. Okay. This one's a long one. So, okay, data centricity depends on a viable network. How are you addressing how the Army and the Joint Force fights through a day without the network, PNT, and digital command and control? By the way, I appreciate the commute Experimentation. Sorry, Mr. Pierce, I couldn't read that last word. But over to you all. Yeah. Fantastic question.
Yeah, well, so again, tune into the Warriors Corner on Next Gen C2, but the watchword, it is cloud enabled, but not cloud dependent. Mm-hmm. And so they'll be able to describe about how we had edge nodes, how we had vehicles communicating with them, how it was able to resync to the cloud, et cetera. That's one piece of it. The other piece of it is to have resilient options for how we do connect our tactical formations. And again, this is kind of, again, an industry ask that we cannot be dependent on just, a low Earth orbit satellite or a terrestrial radio or, a local, tactical 5G network. It has to be a little bit of all of those things to remain resilient. We, particularly when we're in the defense, we found that you have to be prepared to fight in a denied communications environment. The enemy knows where you are. You're in a defense. They will probably find a way to at least degrade, if not deny, your ability to see too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got it, guys. I haven't had my second cup of coffee. Experimentation is not exercise. That's the comment that we appreciated. Yeah. Okay. Next question here. I'm going to find one a little short. What role does mission engineering modeling and simulation play in current or future concept-focused experimentation?
Yeah, I think it's part of all of it. So again, a lot of it's, or a portion of it's live, and a portion of it will absolutely be in simulation. And we do modeling and sim throughout all aspects of our capability development.
Yeah, I would emphasize that one of the important parts of Project Convergence capstone is that much of this is live. Mm-hmm. So when I said we had the Nevada Test and Training Range in Nellis Air Force Base, those are live emitters, live, in some cases, exquisite enemy capabilities with live detection means from all of the services, from space on down to ground forces. However, we can't, replicate the scale and the volume by using those emitters. And so simulation is what rounds out what we have. At the height of about a 6-hour period, the 18th Airborne Corps prosecuted about 200 targets. Obviously, those were not all real, but they did have to have the assets live or in sim to do the detection of them, decide what the right means to affect them was, and then collect battle damage on them. So simulation is essential for what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely, and at that scale, very critical. Okay, I love this next question. A great rundown on Project Convergence series. What are a few examples of lessons learned with our allies and partners on the interoperability of experimentation in our sustainment and logistics enterprise? How do we follow up with our allies to reinforce that we will remain engaged?
Yeah, so I think one of the best quotes I heard from one of our Five Eye allies was on Project Convergence: if you miss a year, you're really far behind and it's hard to catch up. So they recognize the importance of this. So right alongside the 11AD 237 Armor was the UK Robotics and Autonomous Systems Battle Group. They're going to expand they're seeking to expand their participation next year. The Next Gen C2, their version of data-centric Next Gen C2, they want to scale that as well so we can conduct that collaboration. We didn't do a lot of cross-ally sustainment drills. I don't really recall.
Yeah, the UK had a number of sustainment technologies out there that we gathered information from.
But they were sustaining their forces. We were sustaining ours. There's certainly opportunities there. Things like air defense, 237 Armor, using some of the compelling, air defense technology, certainly found that they covered the entire central corridor with those capabilities, which included both Five Eye allies as well.
Yeah, okay. I joked a couple days in that I think I said we're on day 2 of this experiment, and nobody from another country has complained that a cross-domain solution stripped out all the important information from a fires message, which is a huge growth. So I think we have taken the idea of a cross-domain solution, an NSA-approved box that takes information and decides what you can send to a partner on their network. We've taken that technology about as far as we can. We very much refined it. We had the Army and our partner nations experts there helping build that out. The next the next step is really more of a data-centric model. So there's something called the multinational interoperability protocol. So we advanced that while we were there. Again, go see all the technical folks during the Warriors Corner if you want to hear more about that. But we're absolutely making advances so that we can fight with our allies.
Fantastic. Okay, we have time for a couple more. This one's a little bit challenging question, but I heard the answer woven throughout the day, so I'm excited to hear the answer. Experimentation begins with identifying capability gaps and requirements. Requirements demand resources. There's an obvious discontinuity between requirements and resources. How is FCC handling the acceleration of acquisition?
Yeah, so I think we've got to invest in lethality. We've got to invest in warfighting. So, one thing, you talked about capability gaps, for the students of how the Army runs, the CBA and TBA, the capability-based assessment, threat-based assessment, used to be like a 3-year process. We've now spin that in 9 months because we know we've got to move faster to be able to do that. When you get an assessment that's 3 years old in today's day and age, it's already outdated in terms of what we're doing. So being at Eustis, linking our requirements, enterprise with our concept writers, with our experimentation, so they all feed each other, will naturally assist with making sure we're focusing on the right things.
And you mentioned that you updated
45, yeah.
45
so
right after.
35 documents. What I was going to say in addition to that is last year, Capstone 4, 3 or 4 of the technologies that we identified were such high potential and ready for prime time, if you will, that they're going to be in our Transformation and Contact 2.0, the second iteration. This year, we've identified 45 technologies that, of course, it's subject to funding and decisions, are at the level of maturity and usefulness to a Transformation and Contact unit that they could transfer over, and this next iteration is going to be more than just a brigade, which is what it's really been centered around. It'll include multi-domain task forces, brigade division headquarters, et cetera.
And it was good. It was good. 11AD was not a tick unit, so just having them as a transforming contact unit, just having them at the NTC, getting to actually see the compelling technology out there, it's great for them.
We're making that brigade go. The Army is sending that brigade back to NTC in October, and they will not have next generation command and control systems. They will have the kind of legacy, not even TIC capabilities, and so we're actually going to follow them very closely and learn. What they did with is amazing. What they did with just about a week of training for the most part, and then 4 days of experimentation. Now they got to kind of go backwards, but.
Oh, that'll be interesting. Maybe you can serve up the weather again. Some sleet, some snow, some rain. Okay, last question here. When and where will we address the mass attack IA-enabled Group 3 one-way attack UAS against Division Corps LSCO emplacement maneuver forces? Did anyone understand that?
We
got it.
I think I got it. So it goes back to my offensive and defensive munition capability, affordable munitions that can address both. So, Bill Parker, Rory Crooks, the dynamic duo, and Al Redford between the fires he did, the long-range precision fires, CFT, and the air missile defense, CFT, they're absolutely looking at exactly those kinds of things. I think 2 of the 3 of them are on Warriors Corner.
And in Project Convergence Scenario B, out in the Pacific, it will not just be about which capabilities work, but how do you coordinate across all the people that can sense and shoot to make sure, for example, everybody's not shooting at the first thing coming at you, and we're wasting munitions and magazine depth when there's a whole bunch more behind that.
Joint, combined, cross-service sensor netting, the ability to do that.
Perfect. Brilliant. Well, everyone, first, give them a huge round of applause. Great job. And I just want to say a sincere thank you. Your passion, what you all are working on, your deep love for the warfighter and making sure they get the best capabilities, it truly is unmatched. You've teed up the day beautifully. Continuous transformation. We're driving readiness, lethality. We're doing that together. We're looking at data, NGC2. Pay attention, everyone. It's going to be a fantastic conference. Brilliant start to the day. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you,
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome AUSA Vice President for Leadership and Education, Lieutenant General retired Leslie Smith.
Whoa, what a great fireside chat. Let's give him another round of applause. We're going to take a break until 11:15. Join me in the exhibition hall as you are moving out now, and we'll soon have refreshments, sponsored by RTX. Thank you, RTX. Be here at 11:15 for our first panel.